Survivors shape the narratives of history. Yet what unfolds when the very earth fails to endure? Around 360 BCE, the thinker Plato penned a pair of dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, that would captivate minds for over 2,000 years. These works present Atlantis not merely as legend or symbol, but as a factual chronicle of a society thriving some 9,000 years prior to Plato's era. Positioned past the Pillars of Hercules, known today as the Strait of Gibraltar in the Atlantic, this vast landmass exceeded the size of Libya and Asia together. Governed by monarchs tracing their lineage to Poseidon, it boasted might and structures unmatched in antiquity. Disaster struck abruptly in just one day and night. Tremors and deluges overwhelmed it. The island, along with its urban centers, inhabitants, and vast repository of wisdom, plunged into the ocean and faded from existence. Plato insisted this was no invention. He traced the story to Solon, the Athenian legislator, who encountered it from Egyptian priests on his journey to Sai circa 590 BCE. According to Plato, these priests preserved archives spanning millennia in their sacred sites, chronicling occurrences long erased from Greek memory. They recounted to Solon an epoch when an ancient Athens, predating the famed city of Plato's day, resisted an aggressor from across the western waters. That foe was none other than Atlantis. The tale spans both dialogues. In Timaeus, it's a concise prelude to broader explorations of cosmic order and reality's essence. Critias then resumes, vowing deeper details. The narrator, Critias by name, shares how he first learned it in childhood, from his grandfather, who in turn received it from his father, Dropides, a close kin and companion to Solon. This chain of spoken tradition links Egyptian clergy to Athenian statesmen, then to local lorekeeper, and finally to the philosopher's written record across 4 generations. Plato's particulars paint a vivid picture. Atlantis featured layered circles, 3 aquatic, 2 terrestrial, fashioned by Poseidon to safeguard his human beloved. At the core sat a royal residence and a sanctuary to the god, embellished with gold, silver, and orichalcum, a lustrous alloy emitting a reddish sheen, prized just below gold. Spans of bridges linked the zones, while a grand waterway sliced through to the harbor, enabling vessels to reach the metropolis's interior. Encircling this hub stretched a flat expanse measuring 3,000 stadia by 2,000 stadia, flanked by peaks that blocked chilly northern gales. An intricate web of channels drawing from upland rivers irrigated this broad territory, fostering farms over vast distances. The realm yielded forests for wood, ores of every kind, bountiful harvests, elephants, and all essentials for a thriving society. Atlantis's populace wielded immense riches and dominion. They held sway over their homeland and surrounding isles, projecting power along Africa's coast to Egypt and into Europe, up to Tyrrhenia, present-day Tuscany. With a formidable fleet and forces, their domain sprawled wide, their desires boundless. For ages, the Atlanteans upheld righteousness, steered by their godly heritage from Poseidon. They adhered to statues etched on an orichalcum column within the shrine, dictating behavior and communal bonds. At intervals of 5 or 6 years, the 10 rulers, offspring of Poseidon's 10 heirs, convened to settle quarrels, renew the code, and perform a rite, slaying a bull and anointing the holy stele with its blood. This realm persisted through countless cycles. Gradually, though, their celestial essence waned, As Plato describes, human frailties surged, dominating all. Ambition, avarice, and vice took hold among the Atlanteans. They plotted to conquer the Mediterranean outright. Yet, per the Egyptian lore passed through Plato, Athens rose in opposition. A primordial Athens lost two annals beyond priestly recollection. This elder city rallied allies across the region and thwarted the Atlantean assault. The clash raged intensely. Athens prevailed, only for the deities to act. Zeus, appalled by Atlantis's decay, decreed its doom. Quakes ravaged the terrain. Waters surged inland. Amid one wretched day and night, the conquering yet weary Athenian troops vanished into the soil. Simultaneously, Atlantis submerged forever. Plato's narrative cuts short. Critias, intended to expand the saga, halts midway through a phrase. Did he abandon it, or was the conclusion misplaced? The truth remains elusive. What endures is this shard of a submerged realm, a stark warning on arrogance and celestial retribution, alongside an enigma that persists. Over 2 millennia, seekers have echoed one persistent query. Did Plato craft a moral fable warning against the perils of unchecked power? Or did he draw from genuine events? Thinkers in the later ancient world treated the narrative with gravity. Certain ones located Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, just as Plato outlined. Different voices proposed it lay within the Mediterranean, maybe Crete, or obliterated by the Santorini volcanic blast. Additional interpreters saw it as a symbolic narrative, with Atlantis embodying a once perfect society undone by ethical corruption, serving as a caution to Athens regarding its expanding empire. Over the ensuing ages, the Atlantis saga waxed and waned in scholarly circles. During the Middle Ages, most learned figures dismissed it, favoring scriptural narratives of human origins. The Renaissance revived interest in Plato's writings, prompting heated discussions on the account's truthfulness. The unearthing of the New World, toward the end of the 1400s, ignited fresh hypotheses. Atlantis might have been an actual Atlantic land bridge submerged today, familiar to early civilizations, before fading from knowledge. By the 1800s, the myth permeated everyday culture. Ignatius Donnelly, a U.S. politician and self-taught excavator, released Atlantis, the antediluvian world, in 1882, claiming it as a factual ancient society and the root of every later civilization. The volume flew off shelves, mixing solid historical digs with outlandish guesses, thus revitalizing the myth. Throughout the 1900s, spiritual seekers, visionaries, and fringe historians adopted Atlantis as the origin of vanished knowledge, superior inventions, and even alien influences. The legend evolved wildly, inflated far past Plato's more measured version. Untethered from its origins, Atlantis morphed into whatever suited the imagination. A paradise, an admonition, a dream, a fabrication. Still, the fundamental puzzle lingers. Plato framed the episode as historical truth. He called upon Solon, a pillar of Athenian jurisprudence, renowned for his uprightness. He referenced Egyptian clerics whose archives even the Greeks deemed timeless and thorough. He supplied specifics, dimensions, terrain, societal setup, as though mapping an authentic site. Suppose he truly believed it. Not the idea of a sprawling island realm boasting gilded shrines and mythical alloys flourishing past Gibraltar. Such a scenario strains credibility. No geological data backs a massive continental plunge in the Atlantic during Plato's specified era. The inquiry runs deeper. Imagine if Plato, or Solon, or those Egyptian sources encountered garbled piecemeal accounts handed down through ages from authentic submerged territories. Suppose the story's heart, stripped of flourishes and distortions, echoed a true occurrence. From 20,000 to 8,000 years past, worldwide oceans climbed over 120 meters. Long-settled shorelines disappeared under surging waters. Vast terrains, meadows, waterways, woodlands, basins, were engulfed by the deep. Coastal communities faced upheaval. Their villages sank, their traditions wiped away. These upheavals truly unfolded. They wrought devastation. They were observed by enduring witnesses who passed the recollection onward. Might such impressions, relayed over countless generations, have crystallized into myths of sunken realms? Could Sunderland, Doggerland, Beringia, tangible sites now submerged, form the forebears of Atlantis? Plato lacked awareness of glacial-era water rises. The field of geology was unknown in his era. He couldn't grasp drifting land masses, thawing glaciers, or how global shorelines had transformed dramatically mere millennia prior. Nevertheless, he depicted a submerged territory, vaster than any known to his time, ravaged by quakes and deluges, erased by the sea, in a disaster sparing no one. The particulars the site errs. The chronology may be foreshortened, yet the sequence, territory, inhabitants, calamity, inundation, aligns. Thus, we circle back. Was Atlantis authentic? The response hinges on one's definition of authenticity. If it demands an exact match to Plato's vision, a ringed metropolis with aureate sanctuaries governed by half-gods obliterated in one day 9,000 years prior to 360 BC, then Atlantis was never real. If authenticity signifies a lingering echo of territories that truly vanished, sifted through endless oral traditions until facts blurred into folklore, but the kernel endured, then yes. Atlantis might not denote a single locale, but a multitude. It could encompass every shoreline claimed by climbing tides. It may represent humanity's shared inheritance of grief, etched into the tales we weave to make sense of a world remade. Plato wasn't alone in chronicling vanished domains. Worldwide, through epochs, people have shared yarns of societies devoured by floods, disasters that redrew the globe, birthplaces surviving solely as echoes. The Greeks possessed Atlantis. Various cultures came up with their own titles, specifics, and rationales for these tales. Yet the recurring theme persists. The sea holds on to recollections that fade from our minds. Under the surface, submerged river valleys and flooded grasslands lie quietly, safeguarding traces of the societies that thrived in those spots long ago. Artifacts like flint implements, remnants of hearths, and impressions left in prehistoric sediment remain intact, shielded by the very element that overwhelmed them. If Atlantis represents a collective recollection, it extends far beyond Plato's own. It belongs to all humankind, a recollection predating scripts, urban centers, and the structured societies we recognize today. An echo from an era when the planet looked vastly different, when territories vanished that no longer grace our maps, when early humans observed the seas encroaching and realized something irreplaceable was slipping away. Pursuing Atlantis isn't about unearthing opulent metropolises or long-gone advanced realms. It's about reclaiming that shared recollection, piecing together the extent of the disappearance, the ways it endured in lore, and its impact on those who endured the upheaval. We're on the verge of diving into that pursuit. We'll trace the hints from Plato, steering clear of the Atlantic and venturing instead to realms beyond his vision. We'll plunge into the depths of the North Sea, the Java Sea, the Baltic, and the Pacific. We'll uncover those vanished territories and learn that reality, while not as mythical, proves far more intriguing and meaningful than anticipated. Plato wasn't the sole visionary of submerged realms. 2 millennia on, researchers would float their version of a vanished landmass, drawing not from old writings but from the puzzle of lemurs. It was 1864. Charles Darwin's evolutionary framework had appeared just 5 years prior, transforming naturalists' grasp of how creatures spread worldwide. A specific enigma troubled the British zoologist, Philip Lutley Sclater. Lemurs populated Madagascar and India, divided by immense oceanic expanses. Strangely, they skipped Africa and the Middle East, the very regions in between. This defied logic. As primates and terrestrial creatures, lemurs couldn't navigate broad swaths of sea. For them to originate in one area and migrate to another, an unbroken trail of settlements should connect the groups. Fossils revealed lemur forebears in Madagascar and India from millions of years back, but Africa and Arabia yielded no signs of their presence. Sclater offered an answer. In a piece called quote, _0_ for the Quarterly Journal of Science, he contended that Madagascar and India were once joined by an enormous land bridge across the southern Indian Ocean. This land, he theorized, had fractured and largely submerged, sparing just Madagascar, India, and some minor isles. Lemurs had roamed freely over this bygone expanse. As it splintered, their groups got cut off on the leftover fragments. He dubbed this imagined land Lemuria, inspired by the creatures it sought to clarify. Such notions weren't rare back then. During the mid-19th century, prior to continental drift gaining traction, experts in geology and biology often invoked submerged connections to justify matching plants and animals in areas now isolated by seas. Speculation about continents shifting up and down, with bridges emerging and vanishing, was widespread. Sclater's Lemuria joined a roster of similar ideas. 6 years afterward, the German biologist Ernst Haeckel took the concept further than Sclater had envisioned. Haeckel championed Darwin fervently and was a tireless classifier, sketching intricate family trees of species interconnections. He also hunted for humankind's beginnings. Darwin placed human origins in Africa, home to our nearest kin, the great apes. Haeckel demurred. He insisted the first humans, those elusive intermediates between apes and us, arose in Asia. Lemuria, he posited, made an ideal setting. A sprawling tropical expanse in the Indian Ocean, now underwater, could have nurtured humanity's dawn. The lack of early human relics there, simple. The land sank, dragging the evidence down too. Haeckel released charts depicting Lemuria stretching from Madagascar through India to the East Indies, linking 3 major landmasses. He labeled it humanity's likely original haven or earthly paradise. Peers in science during his time gave his views real weight. The quest for our roots was just starting, and Lemuria neatly filled holes in the bone record. Soon, the idea drifted from empirical study into the occult. In 1888, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who established the Theosophical Society, issued The Secret Doctrine, a vast tome of mystical thought purporting to unveil humankind's concealed past. Blavatsky wove Lemuria into her expansive worldview, positing it as the origin point for the third root race, one of 7 phases in humanity's spiritual progression. In her telling, the Lemurians stood apart from typical people. Towering giants reaching 15 feet in height, equipped with 4 arms and a mystical third eye, positioned right in their foreheads. As hermaphrodites, they reproduced via eggs. Coexisting with dinosaurs, they wielded extraordinary powers like telepathy, astral travel, and even teleportation. These were enlightened entities whose society long predated any recorded history. According to Blavatsky, Lemuria thrived millions of years back before volcanic upheavals wiped it out. Its refugees scattered to distant regions, seeding the roots of subsequent cultures. She insisted her knowledge stemmed from the Book of Xian, a purportedly ancient manuscript from Atlantis, safeguarded by secret guardians in Tibet. To this day, no one outside her circle has laid eyes on it. Blavatsky's ideas profoundly shaped occult and emerging New Age communities. Her portrayal of Lemuria as a vanished spiritual Eden ignited far more fascination than Sclater's straightforward ecological idea ever could. What started as a scientific notion transformed into full-blown myth, a hub for mystical theories, and an emblem of vanished knowledge and untapped potential. Early in the 1900s, Anglo-American author James Churchward expanded the tale even more, shifting focus to the sunken land of Mu, cradle of humanity. In 1926, he released a collection of volumes detailing a massive Pacific expanse named Mu, a term he adapted from prior musings on Atlantis and merged with Lemuria. Churchward asserted that a Hindu temple priest in India, encountered while he served as a military man, had revealed Mu's secrets through ancient inscriptions. Those writings, attributed to the Nakals of Mu, outlined a thriving society of 64 million souls, spread across a landmass stretching 5,000 miles long and 3,000 miles across. In Churchward's narrative, Mu served as the true Eden, the wellspring of every major human heritage. The Egyptians, Babylonians, Persians, Indians, and Mayans all traced their lineages to exiles from Mu. Around 10,000 BC, he described, a barrage of eruptions and quakes doomed the continent, plunging it into the Pacific in one devastating event. He included charts, illustrations, and vivid accounts of Mu's societal norms, buildings, and innovations. Residents dwelled under see-through ceilings. They communicated mind to mind. Lifespans stretched into centuries. They grasped universal enigmas, yet none of it rested on verifiable proof. The inscriptions he referenced never materialized. The Nakal tongue he depicted lacks any authentic foundation. His sketched outlines of Mu align with no recognized landforms. Contemporary seafloor surveys of the Pacific reveal no submerged realm. That seabed remains old, steady, and unmarked by any abrupt flooding. Still, Churchward's works flew off shelves. They resonated with audiences craving tales of vanished worlds and enigmas of antiquity. Mu soon blended with Lemuria, the terms swapped or fused based on the teller. Down in southern India, the Lemuria saga evolved uniquely. Tamil activists seized on it to bolster Kumari Kandam, a fabled drowned territory from 15th century Tamil writings. Local lore held Kumari Kandam as the original Tamil domain, swallowed by the Indian Ocean and prompting their northward shift to current territories. Certain Tamil enthusiasts equated it with Lemuria, claiming Tamil speech and traditions as the planet's most ancient, born on that elusive land. The myth fused with Tamil essence, embodying cultural honor and legacy. It endures in Tamil society now, mixing old legends with contemporary fringe science. All the while, legitimate research advanced. By the 1960s, plate tectonics theory took hold, upending the field of earth sciences. Lands don't plunge suddenly. They wander gradually across eons, propelled by shifting crustal slabs. Lemur patterns made sense, sans a missing continent. Madagascar in India, once linked not via a bridge but within the vast supercontinent Gondwana, which fragmented about 180 million years past. As pieces separated, Madagascar's lemurs developed alone, while kin on Africa's and Asia's continents faded or morphed into different forms. Lemuria proved unnecessary. The once viable scientific proposal from 1864 had become outdated by 1970. But the narrative lingers. In 2013, researchers uncovered an intriguing find. Examining granite specimens pulled from the seabed south of Mauritius, scientists uncovered zircon crystals over 3 billion years old. The island of Mauritius, formed volcanically just 2 million years ago, couldn't have produced them. These ancient zircons must have originated from a far older landmass that predated the island's emergence from the waves. Deeper studies pointed to a microcontinent, a modest chunk of continental crust that once floated in the Indian Ocean before tectonic movement stretched and weakened it, causing it to submerge. The team dubbed it Mauritia. This wasn't the Lemuria of Slater's dreams, nor a bridge accounting for lemur spread, and definitely not the esoteric society dreamed up by Blavatsky or Churchward. Instead, it was a leftover sliver of ancient Gondwana, detached, wandered, and finally sank under the sea. Mauritia highlighted a key truth. Many continents can vanish beneath the waves. In suitable geological scenarios, bits of continental crust get dragged down past sea level. The process unfolds gradually across millions of years as tectonic pressures elongate and erode the crust until it buckles under its own mass. Zealandia, largely underwater in the Pacific, serves as another such case. These represent genuine submerged realms, verified through geology, charted via sonar, and probed by experts. Thus, Lemuria lingers in a way, not in Slater's formulation, nor Blavatsky's vision, nor Churchward's depiction, but as a nudge that the line dividing legend from fact isn't as sharp as we think. Slater's drive to posit a vanished continent stemmed from a valid insight. The planet's present layout doesn't account for all puzzles. He examined solid clues and offered a way to interpret them. His explanation missed the mark, but the inquiry hit it. The mystics and fringe archaeologists who came after grabbed the label and ditched the rigor, spinning wild tales atop a base of lemurs and linkages. They botched almost every detail. Still, their hunch that profound losses shaped history, that bygone eras hold enigmas begging exploration, carried a kernel of validity. Oceans do conceal vanished territories. Continents do submerge, shores do flood, societies have been uprooted by climbing waters. Geology and archaeology back these realities. The trick lies in sifting truth from tall tales, actual sunken expanses from fabricated paradises, authentic disasters from fabricated dooms. The Lemuria hypothesis from science is long buried. The Lemuria legend thrives on. It persists in Tamil traditions, New Age shelves, digital discussions, and spiritual gatherings. It thrives because people crave the idea of a transformed world, erased wisdom, enduring riddles. And they're on to something. The world did shift, Wisdom did vanish, riddles do linger, though not the ones they conjure. As Lemuria waned in scholarly circles, yet bloomed in the mind's eye, fresh tales of sunken realms surfaced. Worldwide, societies shared accounts of birthplaces, devoured by the deep, colossal inundations that remade the globe, forebears who endured calamity and passed down echoes of the gone. Certain narratives are wholesale fabrications. Some might echo real echoes. To discern them, we examine the tales on their own terms, not twisted through Blavatsky's occult filter, but as earnest human efforts to recall, interpret, and grapple with a planet altered beyond our grasp. Such narratives span every landmass, every culture, divided by vast seas and ages. The motif recurs. A massive deluge, a flooded planet, a few who endure, the echo of the irretrievable. The West's best-known rendition is Noah's Ark. In Genesis, God sees mankind's corruption and resolves to scour the earth with a torrent. Solely Noah, virtuous, finds mercy. God bids him craft an ark, assemble his kin and every beast in twos, and endure. Rain pours for 40 days and nights. Floods climb until mountaintops vanish. All breathing life perishes. After long months afloat, the ark grounds on Mount Ararat. Noah dispatches a dove. It brings back an olive sprig, heralding the ebb. Renewal dawns. This scriptural deluge isn't the earliest telling. 2 millennia prior to Genesis's penning, Sumerians etched the epic of Gilgamesh on clay. There, Gilgamesh quests for eternal life and encounters Utnapishtim, survivor of a divine flood. Utnapishtim shares how the gods, irked by humankind's clamor, plotted to erase society via a cataclysmic rain. The god Ea alerts Utnapishtim in sleep, urging him to raise his home, construct a vessel, and stock it with life's essence. Utnapishtim complies. The deluge arrived and raged for 6 days and nights, its ferocity so overwhelming that it frightened even the deities themselves. As the floodwaters began to recede, the vessel came to rest atop a peak. Utnapishtim sent out birds to scout for solid earth. In time, land emerged, prompting him to offer sacrifices to the gods. The similarities to the tale of Noah are evident. Experts have observed for ages that the flood account in Genesis probably drew from or originated alongside Mesopotamian lore. While specifics diverge, 7 days compared to 40, a vessel rather than an ark, Mount Nisir instead of Mount Ararat, the overall framework matches perfectly. A virtuous individual receives a divine alert, a craft is constructed, creatures are preserved. The deluge annihilates the planet, the remnant restarts human life. Far across the globe, Hindu lore features Matsya, the fish incarnation of Vishnu. King Manu rescues a tiny fish from predators in the water. The creature swells to gigantic size and discloses its identity as Vishnu. Matsya foretells a catastrophic inundation that will erase the world, advising Manu to construct a vessel and collect seeds from every plant, mates of every beast, along with the 7 wise sages. The torrent arrives, and Matsya tows the boat amid the turbulent seas by a cord attached to his horn. Once the waters ebb, the craft settles on a summit. Manu and his group stand as the only survivors, from whom humankind arises anew. In classical Greek mythology, Deucalion's narrative echoes this motif. Enraged by mortal depravity, Zeus unleashes a flood to obliterate everything. Prometheus alerts his son, Deucalion, and his spouse, Pyrrha. They fashion a chest, fill it with supplies, and weather the catastrophe. 9 days later, the surge abates, depositing the chest on Mount Parnassus. Deucalion and Pyrrha revive the population by hurling stones behind them, which turn into males and females. Aztec legends speak of Coxcox, who endured a divine flood meant to purge earthly wickedness. Coxcox and his partner drifted in a hollowed cypress trunk until the waters withdrew. They reached a mountaintop and served as progenitors for all subsequent generations. In Chinese folklore, the saga of Yu involves a vast flood that submerged the territory for many generations. The ruler commanded Gun to master the waters, but Gun's efforts failed, leading to his death. Yu, his offspring, triumphed by dredging canals and erecting barriers, ultimately subduing the deluge. Following 13 years of toil, the populace hailed Yu as a champion, and he established the Jia dynasty. Native American groups possess their distinct flood narratives. The Ojibwe recount an era when waters engulfed the world, and Nanabojo, a cunning spirit, reformed the terrain with aid from creatures that plunged into the depths to fetch mud. The Haida from the Pacific Northwest describe a massive inundation where only canoeists who escaped to peaks endured. In South America, the Muisca of Colombia relate how Chibchacum, in fury, flooded the Bogotá savanna. The deity Bochica intervened, smashing the crags with his staff to form the Tequendama Falls and release the waters. Such accounts persist endlessly. From Africa to Australia, Polynesia, and Southeast Asia, deluge myths permeate virtually every society's spoken heritage. Variations abound in particulars, identities, and divinities, yet the essence endures. Water once devastated the globe, a handful persisted, and through them, creation renewed itself. For generations, academics rejected these tales as mere fantasy, either parallel fabrications born from shared human fears of floods and endurance, or traces of transmission from one origin. Certain theorists claimed all such myths stemmed from the Bible's version, disseminated via explorers and merchants. Alternatives suggested spontaneous emergence, with each society devising responses to regional tempests and calamities. Perspectives shifted as scientists delved deeper into Australian indigenous oral histories. Their discoveries proved remarkable. Australia's Aboriginal inhabitants have occupied the land for a minimum of 65,000 years, representing one of the planet's most enduring, unbroken societies. Their traditions, transmitted across eras through melodies, narratives, and ceremonies, hold precise accounts of terrain's occurrences and environmental shifts, long viewed by non-natives as fanciful lore, charming but unreliable. That view altered when Earth scientists cross-referenced the stories with stratigraphic data. Consider the Narunga of South Australia, whose tales depict Kangaroo Island, linked to the continent, traversable on foot, without vessels. Scientific records verify this connection persisted through the latest glacial period, severed solely by rising oceans about 9,000 years back. Thus, the spoken legacy faithfully retained a recollection of a topography absent for 90 centuries. Similarly, the Yolngu of northern Australia portray an age when the territory stretched northward to what are now scattered isles. Bathymetric mapping of the ocean floor has uncovered submerged river channels and coastal shelves that vanished beneath rising waters at the end of the Ice Age. These tales align closely with scientific evidence. One of the most compelling examples comes from Spencer Gulf, along South Australia's coast. Various indigenous communities there recount a period when the Gulf was absent, replaced by expansive dry terrain, where people resided and foraged. In their accounts, surging waters eventually inundated the region, forming the Gulf itself. Scientific analysis supports this. During the most recent ice age, Spencer Gulf remained exposed land only to be submerged by escalating sea levels around 10,000 years back. This storytelling tradition captured a happening from 100 centuries earlier. Far from abstract allegories, these narratives offer precise, location-based depictions of tangible ecological shifts, handed down with striking fidelity over more than 400 generations. The key to such endurance rests in the framework of indigenous knowledge practices. Details are embedded in songlines, melodic tales that map out terrains and travels. This wisdom gets strengthened via ceremonies held yearly or in sync with seasons, tied to tangible sites in the environment. Senior members instruct the youth, stressing verbatim recital to guarantee the lore transfers unaltered across generations. The broader ramifications are significant. Should Indigenous Australians have retained true recollections of occurrences from 10,000 years prior, similar feats could apply to other societies. Worldwide deluge legends, often scorned as mere whimsy for ages, may harbor fragments of reality, embellished, turned legendary, encased in spiritual or ethical layers, yet grounded in actual incidents. Across Europe, folklore brims with tales of submerged territories, recalled long ahead of contemporary digs verifying them. Lyonesse, from Cornish lore, linked Cornwall to the Isles of Scilly as a thriving, verdant realm filled with villages and fields. A fierce tempest one evening unleashed a massive surge, letting the ocean overwhelm the territory. Only Trevelyan, a lone rider, outran the torrent on his steed. The Isles of Scilly, legend holds, mark the peaks of Lyonesse surviving the deluge. To this day, anglers near Cornwall's shores sometimes glimpse submerged relics below the surface. Wise, in Breton mythology, stood as a splendid coastal metropolis in Brittany, shielded by an immense embankment with portals unlocked solely during ebb tides. The Princess Dahut, offspring of King Gradlon, fell under a demon's spell, who then pilfered the portal key. At peak tide, the find flung open the barriers, and waves swallowed the city. Gradlon spurred away on horseback with his daughter holding fast. St. Paul materialized, declaring Dahut's wrongdoing had triggered the catastrophe. Gradlon cast her into the surf, halting the water's advance. Rhys plunged below, and on serene days, underwater chimes from the sunken city's bells are said to echo still. Cantref Gwaelod, the lowland hundred in Welsh folklore, formed a lush meadow extending westward from modern Wales's shoreline. A barrier, overseen by Prince Scythenin, safeguarded it. One evening, the inebriated Scythenin neglected to secure the sluice gates. Torrents poured through, engulfing 16 towns. The domain vanished, with survivors fleeing to higher ground. Today, low tides expose sunken woods and peat layers along the Welsh shore, viewed as echoes of Cantref Gwaelod. High Brazil, from Irish tales, materialized as a misty isle off Ireland's western edge every 7 years, a bountiful domain of sophisticated dwellers. For ages, mariners hunted it. Charts spanning the 14th through 19th centuries plotted High Brazil westward of Ireland as a ring-shaped land split by a waterway. No trace lingers now. Such yarns were long brushed off as quaint fables, yet from the late 1900s into the 2000s, subsea excavations unearthed supporting clues. drowned woodlands lining the shores of Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany, tied to the era of post-Ice Age sea rise. Buried stoneworks like old fish weirs or enclosures, peat layers and timber roots emerging at low water, attesting to former terrestrial expanses. In 2024, explorers diving off Brittany's coast by the Ile de Seine verified a 7,000-year-old stone barrier lying 9 meters down. Stretching 120 meters, it's assembled from precisely arranged rocks. This predates Roman arrivals in the area by thousands of years. Experts propose it served as a fish trap or shield for a seaside outpost. The find sparked renewed curiosity about the Wise saga. Could Wise echo genuine seaside villages lost to encroaching seas? The trend is clear. Societies worldwide recount floods, vanished realms, and forsaken territories. Certain accounts prove spot on. Indigenous Australians held onto visions of terrains erased 10,000 years ago. Tales from Europe about sunken cities and inundated shorelines match up with digs uncovering post-Ice Age inundations. However, not every legend of deluges recalls the sea level surge from the glacial era. Certain ones recount nearby incidents like river overflows, tidal surges, or tidal waves. Many others serve as allegorical narratives, cautionary lessons on godly retribution and mortal arrogance. Distinguishing genuine history from fiction proves challenging, maybe even unattainable, absent supporting data from earth sciences and digs. Undeniably, though, people observed devastating shifts in their surroundings and held on to those recollections. They wove the recollections into narratives, melodies, and ceremonies. They handed down the insights across generations, long after the occurrences faded from direct recollection, slipping past the edge of documented records, into an era that seemed legendary due to its remoteness. So the real inquiry isn't if these deluge legends hold truth. Plenty stem from actual happenings. Instead, it's which happenings. What sparked the deluges? Which territories sank beneath the waves? Who made it through? And in what ways did they preserve the accounts? To unravel that, we shift from folklore to empirical study. We need to comprehend the dynamics that reconfigured global shorelines, submerged vast expanses of land totaling millions of square kilometers, uprooted communities, and wiped clean whole terrains from existence. We need to grasp the glacial period, the massive thaw, and the realm that vanished as frozen masses liquefied, pushing ocean heights to levels unseen for 100,000 years. To comprehend the inundations that submerged shorelines and birthed the legends passed to us, we journey back 26,000 years to an epoch when Earth felt chillier, more alien, and profoundly altered in form. This marked the height of the most recent glacial phase, or to be exact, the last glacial maximum, when frozen expanses hit their widest spread over the northern half of the globe. Frost-blanketed Canada, Scandinavia, and large swaths of northern Europe. Certain spots lay under ice layers exceeding 2 miles deep. The immense pressure from the ice warped the continental plates, bending the planet's outer shell. Conditions grew tougher, with less moisture, sharper cold. Woodlands pulled back, open plains and frozen steppes spread out. Megafauna, mammoths, woolly rhinos, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, wandered terrains gone forever. Those frozen sheets held a staggering amount of H2O. With so much trapped in solid form, worldwide ocean heights fell about 120 to 130 meters lower than present levels. To picture the impact, picture yourself on Southeast Asia's edge, 20,000 years back. You'd need to descend over 400 feet and trek hundreds of miles westward to hit the waves. The continental margins, those underwater continental rims now under gentle waters, stood as arid ground. Every landmass's borders stretched much farther than now. Archipelagos linked to continents. Modern bodies of water simply weren't there. The world's layout was utterly transformed. Our ancestors endured it all. Modern humans had fanned out through Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia by then. Folks had dwelt along shores for many millennia, angling for fish, harvesting clams, erecting camps close to the surf. Those revealed shelves weren't desolate wastes. They offered lush, bounty-filled habitats. Streams that now pour into seas meandered over those flats, carving gullies, marshes, and inlets, distant from today's beaches. Such spots made ideal spots for settlements. Eventually, the thaw set in. The shift away from the last glacial maximum kicked off roughly 18,000 years ago. It stemmed from the planet's orbital rhythms. Minor shifts in Earth's lean and path redistributed solar rays over its face. Dubbed Milankovitch cycles, these shifts sparked chain reactions. Milder heat started dissolving ice. As it dissolved, less light bounced off to the cosmos, spurring more heat. With heat building, further ice dissolved. The cycle sped up. The thaw didn't proceed evenly. It surged in bursts, broken by halts and occasional setbacks. Over millennia, oceans climbed steadily, mere meters each 100 years, gradual enough that someone through a full life might miss it save for noting the beach had crept from where elders described. Then hit the swift surges. Circa 14,500 years ago, meltwater pulse 1A struck, spanning just centuries, maybe only 300 to 500. Global waters surged 14 to 18 meters, or about 45 to 60 feet. That's a staggering pace. Geologically, it's a blink. For humanity, it's ruinous. Experts still debate meltwater pulse 1A's trigger, but consensus points to the abrupt failure of huge Antarctic ice chunks. Masses, stable for ages, turn volatile, plunging seaward in huge volumes. The influx of water inundated the world's oceans, elevating sea levels universally. At the same time, for communities on vulnerable shorelines, the shift must have felt profoundly disruptive. Estuaries would have swollen, forming marshlands and shallow bays in areas that were once arid. Lowland expanses submerged under waves. Villages had to be forsaken. Vast territories previously suitable for habitation vanished beneath the encroaching tides. Then, about 11,500 years ago, the phenomenon repeated itself. Meltwater pulse 1B, while less intense than its predecessor, spanning roughly 8 to 15 meters across a few hundred years, delivered yet another surge of swift oceanic ascent. This overlapped with the ultimate withdrawal of the massive ice formation spanning North America and northern Europe. The Laurentide ice sheet, which once blanketed much of Canada, was breaking apart. Huge ice-dammed reservoirs shattered their confines, unleashing torrents into the sea. During this era, the North Sea, Baltic Sea, and English Channel all experienced swift reshaping. By roughly 8,000 years ago, ocean heights had settled close to what we see today. From the Ice Age's height to now, the cumulative increase totaled 120 to 130 meters. Grasping the extent of territory surrendered to the waves defies easy imagination. around 20 million square kilometers, or 7.7 million square miles. For scale, that's about double Canada's landmass, exceeding South America's full expanse. These weren't barren expanses. The submerged shelves and littoral zones were Earth's richest habitats, teeming with streams, woodlands, bogs, and diverse fauna. Submerged excavations at select underwater locales reveal signs of human activity. Fishermen's nets have hauled up flint implements from the North Sea bed. Preserved woodlands with trunks anchored in primordial earth lie offshore near Wales, Brittany, and Denmark. Midden heaps, accumulations of shellfish remnants from ancient diets, rest underwater along the shores of Florida, California, and Southeast Asia. The coastal dwellers of that era couldn't fathom the reason for the encroaching waters. Concepts like glacial masses or astronomical rhythms were beyond them. They simply observed the sea's inexorable advance, devouring terrain, bit by bit. In certain regions, the elevation crept so gradually that it escaped notice within one generation. Elsewhere, amid the meltwater surges, the alteration was glaringly obvious. Shoreline hamlets went under. Foraging territories morphed into brackish wetlands. Watercourses altered their paths, with outlets shifting upstream. Certain groups coped by relocating to elevated terrain, reshaping their dwellings and foraging methods. Others faced total upheaval, compelled to venture into territories held by rivals, sparking rivalries, fusing traditions, or fading entirely from historical traces. Today's patchwork of human genetics and languages echoes these movements, even if piecing together the specifics proves challenging. Undeniable truth stands. Humanity beheld the world's submersion. They endured the reconfiguration of shorelines, the engulfing of familiar domains, the forfeiture of ancestral heartlands. They confronted upheavals that surely appeared cataclysmic to them, disruptions eroding any illusion of enduring security, and their recollections weren't exact, lacking chronologies or metrics, devoid of insights into ice dynamics or celestial influences. Instead, they endured via narratives, tales of forebears enduring colossal deluges, sagas of realms that flourished, then dissolved, lore attributing divine wrath and reckoning, of retribution and endurance, of a planet reborn through inundation. The query from the last section, whether authentic inundations could evolve into legends, now receives a clear affirmative. Indeed, those deluges were tangible. The magnitude was staggering, the effects on people were deep-reaching, the chronology matches. From 20,000 to 8,000 years past, amid the era of peak oceanic climb, humans occupied now vanished littorals. Rising floods uprooted them. They persisted, passing on the imprint. Nuances shifted with passing ages. Identities evolved. Deities were summoned to account for the unknowable. Precise sites blurred or merged with distant ones. Spans of thousands of years condensed into mere hours. Such is the nature of spoken heritage. The core motif endures. The exactness erodes. Certain legends hold greater fidelity than others. As noted with indigenous Australians, they retained intricate recollections over 10,000 years. Other societies clung to mere shards, hints of disaster, broad flood narratives, allegorical stories divested of locational anchors. Plato's tale of Atlantis gains fresh significance when viewed this way, not as a precise description of a ring-shaped island past the Strait of Gibraltar, but rather as a warped recollection of submerged territories. Passed down over countless generations, It was enriched with elements drawn from Egyptian or Minoan designs, shaped into a structured story by Plato's own philosophical interests, and committed to writing that endured far beyond the initial spoken lore by thousands of years. Lemuria, in a similar vein, represents a 19th-century effort to unravel genuine biogeographical enigmas, ones stemming from the fact that the planet's geography had truly shifted in earlier times. While Slater's suggested process was incorrect, the underlying sense that territories once thrived before disappearing wasn't wholly off base. Worldwide legends of deluges, when considered as a whole, capture humankind's shared recollection of the Ice Age's close. These stories are flawed, incomplete, and layered with spiritual or ethical interpretations. Yet beneath it all they hold on to a kernel of truth. The planet faced inundation, and humanity endured. With that, we shift from folklore and hypotheses to tangible proof. The edges of continents aren't completely uncharted. Submerged archaeology, despite being a young field, is starting to uncover the submerged realms. Discoveries so far back up the hints from ancient myths. Settlements existed, populations dwelled there, and the waters claimed them. Proving that oceans rose isn't the issue. That's solid, accepted knowledge. The real task lies in pinpointing those exact submerged sites, figuring out their former inhabitants, and piecing together the vanished past. That's the focus of the coming part. We'll explore the actual sunken territories. Doggerland, Sundaland, Zealandia, Beringia. We'll review the latest and developing data that sharpens our view of these forgotten domains. And we'll start perceiving Atlantis less as invention and more as echo, a reminder of a disaster so immense it wove into the narratives of every society that outlasted it. Our initial stop is a place unfamiliar to most, even though it dwarfed India in extent during its time. Sundaland spanned the area of today's Java Sea, Gulf of Thailand, and southern South China Sea during the height of the last glacial period, with oceans over 100 meters below modern heights. Sundaland linked the Malay Peninsula to Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Bali. What are now distinct islands, divided by modest depths, formed one unbroken expanse, its shores pushed out hundreds of kilometers farther than now. The full swath of dry terrain measured about 1.85 million square kilometers, comparable to Mexico's scale. Far from icy wastes or desolate grasslands, Sundaland was lush and temperate, a tropical haven of abundance. Dense jungles blanketed large stretches. Streams descended from Sumatra's and Borneo's highlands, etching channels across the lowlands before spilling into seas much farther north and west than today's edges. Swamps, river deltas, and shoreline mangroves fostered vibrant zones for seafood, fowl, and water-dwelling creatures. Life forms thrived in staggering variety. The terrain hosted megafauna. Stegodons, elephantkin downsized for insular life, wandered the woodlands. Tigers, rhinos, orangutans, and myriad other creatures inhabited networks now forever altered. Scattered artifacts indicate people occupied the area for at least 50,000 years and perhaps more. Then the glaciers thawed, and Sundaland started sinking. It unfolded slowly at the outset. As worldwide warmth increased and northern ice caps withdrew, waters inched higher. Sundaland's borders retreated inward, season by season, across lifetimes. Streams that crossed open fields saw their outlets swallowed, their downstream paths turning salty and marshy. Shoreline woods yielded to salt-tolerant trees, then to waves. Inundation came in waves. Roughly 18,000 years back, the ocean pressed forward steadily. By 14,000 years ago, much of the western flats lay submerged. Next arrived meltwater pulse 1A, circa 14,500 years ago. A swift jump in water levels that swamped huge tracts in mere centuries. The long, steady eastern flats went under. Land bridges to islands broke apart. Stability held for a few millennia after. Then, about 11,500 years ago, meltwater pulse 1B hit, lifting the seas once more. The last ties between the islands snapped. Sumatra, Java, Borneo, formerly unified, emerged as separate entities. The modest waters dividing them today are the flooded echoes of Sunderland's woods and meadows. By 8,000 years ago, the change was mostly done. The ocean had settled close to where it stands now. Sunderland, as a unified whole, was gone. Over half its expanse, around 1 million square kilometers, rested under the surface. We glean this from geological and bathymetric data, not tales or guesswork. The waters of the Java Sea and the Gulf of Thailand feature a relatively shallow seabed, typically between 30 and 40 meters deep, a hallmark of inundated continental margins. Detailed bathymetric mapping has uncovered the underwater terrain, exposing land-based formations such as river courses, watershed areas, and long-lost shorelines that clearly originated on solid ground. Among the most compelling discoveries is the network of prehistoric waterways called the Mullengraaf Rivers, honoring the Dutch scientist who first hypothesized them in the early 1900s. Through sonar imaging and seismic profiling, scientists have followed these sunken riverbeds spanning the Java Sea bottom. These streams merged into an enormous drainage web that carried runoff from Sunderland's heartland northward, discharging into the South China Sea at a spot now far offshore from any coastline. Far from a minor waterway, the Mullen Network ranked among the era's premier fluvial systems, on par with the Amazon or Ganges in magnitude. Its branches extended far into the present-day cores of Sumatra and Borneo. The incisions it left behind remain discernible in bathymetric profiles, with pathways clogged by deposits yet otherwise preserved. This fluvial framework operated over many millennia, nurturing habitats and communities of people along its edges, until encroaching waters flooded the downstream sections and reshaped its mouth into a broad, shallow bay. Beyond the waterways, traces of submerged woodlands appear throughout the area. Trawling fishermen in the Java Sea sometimes haul up wooden remnants like trunks, limbs, and peat fragments, remains of terrestrial life that endured under marine deposits as the ocean advanced. Carbon-14 analysis of such relics yields dates from 10,000 to 20,000 years ago, aligning precisely with the time frame of Sunderland's inundation. Implements of stone have surfaced as well. In the course of years, fishing gear has retrieved axes, scrapers, and similar relics from the depths. Far from sporadic, these recoveries occur often enough to indicate extensive human presence over the flooded lowlands. The artifacts match tools from the Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic periods, typical of foraging groups in Southeast Asia amid the waning Ice Age and dawn of the Holocene. Yet the record of human history here stays fragmentary. Organized subaquatic digs are uncommon, challenged by murky waters, fierce tides, and the immense expanse requiring exploration. Much of our insight derives from chance hauls by anglers or from near-shore spots only partly underwater. Sunderland's profounder zones, probable homes to the most ancient and vital settlements, stay mostly unprobed. A 2023 paper in Nature Communications drew on genetic population analysis to chart how rising seas affected Southeast Asian peoples. By examining contemporary genetic variation alongside digs and paleoclimate evidence, the team pieced together movement routes amid Sunderland's flooding. The results proved remarkable. They pinpointed what may be the first recorded case of compelled relocation of humans due to oceanic encroachment. DNA patterns revealed that groups on Sunderland's open flats were uprooted by advancing waters, shifting toward the interior and elevations of Sumatra, Java, and the Malay Peninsula. Rather than one abrupt shift, this exodus unfolded gradually across millennia. With every surge of inundation claiming fresh territory, communities relocated, blended with upland dwellers, or retreated to ever harsher zones. Echoes of these shifts linger in today's regional gene pools. The research further posited Sunderland as a key hub for cultural and innovative growth in the late Ice Age. Its lush climate, plentiful supplies, and expansive terrain could have harbored sizable societies. As the territory sank, the expertise, tongues, and traditions of its inhabitants might have endured through escapees or vanished based on relocation's trials. Lately, focus has shifted to Gunung Padang, a West Java mound adorned with stepped stone arrangements that certain experts view not as geological quirks but as echoes of a primeval megalithic complex. Indonesian geologist Danny Hillman Natawijaja has performed seismic probing and drill extractions there, asserting signs of hidden cavities and builds reaching back 25,000 years. Should these claims hold, Gunung Padang would stand as one of humanity's earliest built wonders, outdating Egypt's pyramids, Stonehenge, and even Göbekli. Natawijaja proposes that the location could link to an advanced civilization predating the Ice Age, which might have thrived across the open expanses of Sunderland, with its remnants constructing Gunung Padang as a memorial or sanctuary amid the encroaching seas. Such ideas remain hotly debated. Numerous archaeologists and geologists challenge Natawijaja's analysis, pointing out that the seismic evidence remains unclear and that geological forces alone might account for the formations he credits to ancient builders. Radiocarbon analyses from the area yield conflicting outcomes, and external validations are scarce. The prevailing view holds that although Gunung Padang likely features megalithic elements from the Neolithic era, dating back some 5,000 to 7,000 years, proof of far earlier human work falls short. Still, this discussion highlights a broader puzzle. What kind of life unfolded on Sunderland during its occupied phase? Did its residents consist merely of scattered foraging bands relying on mobile tools and leaving scant archaeological footprints? Or did more intricate communities develop, complete with enduring villages, exchange systems, and cultural legacies, now swallowed by the waves? The answers elude us. Available data proves too thin. One certainty stands out. Sunderland existed. It supported human life, and its submergence scattered substantial populations across extended timelines. Might Sunderland represent Atlantis? The chronology hints at possibilities. According to Plato, Atlantis sank 9,000 years prior to his era, aligning roughly with 9,360 BC. The decisive surge in sea levels that isolated Sunderland's final terrestrial bridges happened about 11,500 years past, around 9,500 BC. These timelines overlap sufficiently to spark curiosity, yet the landscapes diverge sharply. Plato situated Atlantis past the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic, whereas Sundaland occupies Southeast Asia, worlds apart. No straightforward path explains how a Southeast Asian tale could travel to Egypt, pass to Solon, and reach Plato with such fidelity, barring centuries of diffusion via commerce and spoken lore, evolving and merging with diverse deluge myths en route. Furthermore, Plato's account of Atlantis features specifics like nested circles, gilded shrines, orichalcum, and a structured superpower, none of which echo in Sundaland's record. The unearthed stone, implements, and submerged woodlands point to existences rooted in foraging or nascent farming, far from the sophisticated metropolis Plato envisioned. Nevertheless, the fundamental aspects resonate. An expansive territory, settled by people, overwhelmed by gradual inundation that folklore could recall as a sudden calamity. Refugees scattered, preserving echoes of their vanished realm. Should Atlantis echo submerged territories, Sundaland qualifies as a prospect, not matching Plato's portrait, but as a tangible domain surrendered to the depths, recalled in shards and warped by epics. This idea ventures into conjecture. Absent inscriptions from that epoch, or thorough subaquatic digs, we can't validate or dismiss the tie. What remains solid is the following. Sundaland spanned vastness. It hosted dwellers and it vanished. The sea devoured one of prehistory's grandest livable domains. Those who dwelled there faced relocation. Their territory endures solely in sunken streams, flooded woods, and the inherited echoes of their lineage. Sundaland wasn't unique. Globally, parallel territories submerged concurrently. In the frigid North Sea depths, a further sunken expanse faded under the surf, a region later termed Doggerland. Doggerland sprawled below the North Sea, bridging Britain to continental Europe. In the latest glacial period, as ice blanketed Scandinavia and northern Europe's breadth, Doggerland stayed free of frost, emerging as solid ground. A broad plain extended from Britain's eastern edges to the coasts of Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. In its fullest reach, it spanned about 46,620 square kilometers, comparable to Denmark's footprint. The terrain lay mostly flat with subtle undulations etched by streams channeling northern glacial runoff. Swamps and bogs prevailed, dotted by elevated zones clad in birch and pine groves. Those waterways, some now traceable as hidden courses via sonar imaging, coursed west and north, spilling into the Atlantic, well offshore from today's British margins. Doggerland surfaced roughly 12,000 years ago, with the glacier's waning advance. By 10,000 years prior, it offered full habitability, boasting a mild climate abundant in provisions. Packs of red deer, aurochs, and wild pigs roamed the fields. Beavers engineered lodges along the streams. Seals and fish teemed in the shorelines and estuaries. Vast flocks of birds passed through the area, settling in the marshes to breed. To the Mesolithic inhabitants of Dogland, this land was an earthly haven. Historians have dubbed it Europe's premier spot for hunting and fishing during that era, thanks to its prime seaside location that granted entry to both land-based and ocean bounty. Marshes brimmed with waterbirds, while woodlands supplied wood, wild animals, and forageable vegetation. Streams and coastal inlets abounded with fish, mollusks, and sea mammals. Though their communities were modest in size compared to today's, spread out in nomadic bands that tracked the rhythms of nature. Dogland stood out as a realm of plenty in Mesolithic terms. Archaeologists refer to these residents as members of the Maglemosian culture, a label drawn from a Danish peat bog, where signature implements and preserved remains first surfaced. These foragers excelled at crafting from stone, antler, and timber. They fashioned serrated spears from stag horns, chisels and adze from chert, and angling lures from skeletal remains. Their dwellings were probably portable setups, easy to relocate while pursuing prey and aquatic life. They navigated waterways and shores using hollowed-out vessels or simple floats. Evidence of their presence on Dogland survives in remnants that archaeologists are steadily uncovering. The inaugural major relic from the region turned up in 1931. A trawler called Kinda was operating in the North Sea, some 25 miles from Norfolk's shore, in depths around 40 meters. The drag net caught on an object, and upon retrieval, the team extracted a fashioned bone fragment from the netting. It turned out to be a serrated spear tip, sculpted from red deer antler with a socket meant for binding to a handle. The projections were keen and slanted to keep impaled catches from slipping free. Subsequent carbon-14 analysis dated it to 8,000 to 10,000 years back. This wasn't some modern cast-off from a vessel. It was an implement forged and employed by folks on what is now submerged terrain. Discoveries have kept coming since. In 2019, a dive team collaborating with underwater experts dredged up a hammerstone, a rounded pebble for napping flint, from the seabed 40 kilometers offshore from Britain at 32 meters down. The rock bore evident wear, strike marks, splits typical of pounding. It lay in deposits linked to the late Mesolithic, aligning chronologically with the Kinda find. Trawlers now and then haul in mammoth skeletons, fangs from vanished megafauna, and petrified timber from the depths. Yet the flint implements, gravers, edges, nodules, crop up frequently enough to indicate substantial human activity across Dogland's former grasslands. Certain sites have yielded intact tracks. Back in 2013, researchers off Norfolk's coast unearthed a stratum with 39 human impressions etched into what was once a tidal silt bed by a river delta. These dated to about 850,000 years prior, predating Dogland's heyday by ages. Still, they show the North Sea bottom can safeguard fragile imprints over vast time. If such ancient steps endured, then those from 10,000 years ago could too, lurking in suitable spots yet to be explored. Europe's standout find from the Doggerland period didn't hail from the drowned plain directly, but from adjacent waters. In 2024, scientists revealed a rock barrier on the Baltic seafloor, submerged 70 feet, extend in a half-mile, built from over 1,600 positioned boulders and pegged at more than 10,000 years old. It's Europe's earliest identified game trap. The barrier aligns with a long-lost beach line now underwater. Its layout is intentional, with rocks piled to form a short wall, probably meant to herd caribou or similar wanderers into kill zones for lurking hunters. This setup mirrors Mesolithic traps elsewhere in Europe, but those are terrestrial. This underwater version hints at the environmental tweaks and tactical foresight these groups possessed. It ranked among 2024's top 10 digs. The revelation underscored that local humans weren't mere roamers. They molded their surroundings, erecting lasting installations that demanded forethought, effort, and teamwork. With such a feature in the Baltic, it's plausible that parallels dot the North Sea. Bed in old Dogland, the challenge lies in detecting them. The North Sea thwarts dives, Underwater sight lines rarely exceed a meter, and the tides run fierce. Tides are always moving sediment around, which hides or reveals landforms in ways that can't be predicted. The region sees a lot of activity from ships, oil and gas operations, as well as fishing boats. Now offshore wind farms are adding to the mix. The push for wind power in the North Sea is growing quickly, with thousands of turbines going up. Each one demands detailed seabed checks, cable routes, and building work that churns up the ocean floor. Experts in archaeology have cautioned that this progress, essential though it is for clean energy, endangers the underwater historical sites. If the seafloor gets messed up, any relics or structures in the zone could be ruined or spread out irretrievably. This pressing need sparked the Subnautica initiative, which started in 2024, backed by €11.5 million. It's a cross-border effort, uniting archaeologists, geologists, and engineers from various European universities and research centers. The aim is to chart and explore the sunken terrains of the North Sea methodically, pinpointing archaeologically important spots before development wipes them out. The initiative relies on cutting-edge tools. Detailed sonar scans create 3D images of the seabed, while sub-bottom profiling uncovers hidden elements under sediment layers, and core sampling pulls up materials for age testing and study. AI helps process the huge amounts of data from these efforts, spotting trends and oddities that could signal past human presence, things like old river paths, prehistoric shorelines, or spots where stone tools might cluster. Vince Gaffney, an archaeologist from the University of Bradford and a key player in Doggerland studies, mentioned that the group is on the verge of discovering communities. Sonar scans have uncovered scores of promising locations where the landscape hints at things like river junctions, sheltered bays, or raised areas that Mesolithic foragers would have favored. The upcoming stage calls for focused probes, including dives, sampling, and maybe digs to verify if these formations are from nature or people. Time is running out. Building wind farms is outpacing the speed of archaeological checks. Each year, larger sections of the North Sea bottom get changed. Subnautica is a bid to rescue the knowledge that remains before it's gone forever. Doggerland's end came not through slow flooding, but disaster. About 8,200 years back, a huge subsea slump happened near Norway's shore, called the Storegga Slide. It unleashed roughly 3,500 cubic kilometers of buildup, sediment, mud, clay, and rubble from the continental shelf, gathered over ages. Instability arose, perhaps from a quake or methane release in the deposits, sending it plunging into the abyss. Shifting that volume sparked a tsunami. The surges spread far and wide, sweeping into the North Sea. Upon hitting Britain's shores, Norway's and Doggerland's flat expanses, they hit hard. Traces of the Storegga tsunami turn up at various North Sea spots. Layers of marine shells and sand, dropped deep inland and higher than usual tides, show the wave's path. In one Scottish location, the debris lies over 20 kilometers from the sea, pointing to waves several meters tall on impact. For Doggerland, shrunken by millennia of climbing waters, this was the knockout punch. Vast stretches of leftover terrain got swamped. Shore communities were wiped away. Longtime residents of the lowlands either perished in the flood or escaped to safer elevations, the British hills westward, Danish and German shores eastward. Figures indicate perhaps a quarter of Britain's Mesolithic folk lost their lives in the tsunami or right after. This draws from the era's small numbers, probably just thousands total on the island, with most camps hugging coasts and streams, the very zones exposed to the onslaught. Those who made it saw their world shatter. Open fields, woods, and waterways turned to a treacherous, shallow bay. If the trauma lingered in stories passed down orally, the sole record-keeper back then, it would have run deep. A realm sunk in hours. A whole terrain vanished. Escapees hauling scant belongings, abandoning bodies and shattered homes. Might echoes of Storega fed into the deluge legends of succeeding societies. Quite likely, the calamity was abrupt, devastating, and etched in memory, hitting when tales were history's thread. Should tales of that catastrophe have been transmitted across generations, they could have merged with recollections of encroaching waters and tales of territories swallowed by the sea, weaving into a larger saga of floods and endurance. By around 6,000 years ago, Dogland had vanished completely beneath the waves. The gentle shallows of the North Sea now blanketed what once ranked as Europe's prime territory for foraging. Its former inhabitants had dispersed, integrating into nearby communities or fading from the record altogether. The territory itself transformed into a prime spot for angling. Sunken woodlands and peat layers there from time to time, caught in trawlers' gear. Its waterways dwindled to mere furrows in the sediment. Its legacy endured solely through relics gradually surfacing from the abyss. Yet the chronicle of Doggerland persists. Annually, fresh findings come to light. The 2024 Baltic Wall revealed that Mesolithic Europe boasted greater intricacy and structure than scholars once believed. The Subnautica initiative holds potential for further breakthroughs. Lurking under the North Sea, villages linger, fire pits, stashes of implements, maybe even skeletal traces. Traces of existences on terrain that has ceased to be. Dogland differed from Atlantis. It was chillier, more unforgiving, home to modest bands of foragers instead of a mighty realm. Still, it existed, and it perished. Those who endured its inundation bore its recollection onward. Not every submerged terrain faced such abrupt demise. Certain areas descended gradually across eons unobserved by humanity. The subsequent territory we explore belongs to this category, a landmass that plunged deep before people ever set foot on the planet, though its presence alters our grasp of continental essence. Zealandia offers an alternative account, unlike Sunderland and Dogand, which submerged across millennia as observers escaped and legends took shape. Zealandia descended across tens of millions of years in languid progression, shaped not by thawing glaciers, but by the unyielding dynamics of tectonic plates. In 2017, geologists officially suggested designating Zealandia as Earth's eighth continent. This bid arose from careful deliberation. It stemmed from years of investigation, charting, and scrutiny of the ocean bed in the southwestern Pacific. The case proved simple. Zealandia fulfills every geologic standard for a continent. It possesses unique rock formations with continental rather than oceanic bedrock. It features clear edges apart from the adjacent seabed. It maintains a consistent framework, a single expanse traceable along the underwater terrain, and it spans vast reaches. Zealandia encompasses about 4.9 million square kilometers, a territory akin to the Indian subcontinent and nearly two-thirds that of Australia. Were it surfaced, it would rank among the globe's mightiest expanses, a standalone continent too prominent to ignore. Yet Zealandia stays mostly concealed. 94% of it rests below the Pacific surface, unseen save by those poring over bathymetric charts or seismic data. The scant portions above water constitute New Zealand, New Caledonia, and assorted minor isles. These represent the summits of Zealandia's ranges, the sole segments to remain arid. The remainder, the expansive flats, stream basins, continental margins, lies drowned in places over 1,000 meters down. Zealandia's descent unfolded without haste. It didn't submerge within mere millennia, propelled by glacial melt and surging tides. Rather, it settled incrementally over about 80 million years, starting as it split from the supercontinent Gondwana in the late Cretaceous era. Gondwana, amid the dinosaur epoch, formed one of Earth's twin colossal landmasses, the southern supercontinent destined to shatter into South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, India, and Zealandia. Circa 85 million years back, the tectonic pressures binding Gondwana started to tear it asunder. Fissures formed. The bedrock elongated and attenuated. Molten rock surged upward, forging fresh seabed as the pieces separated. Zealandia broke free from Australia and Antarctica, shifting eastward toward the emerging Pacific. During this drift, the very forces directing its path also dictated its height. The bedrock, elongated and weakened through rifting, lost buoyancy, where robust continental bedrock rides elevated atop the heavier underlying mantle, upholding peaks and uplands, attenuated bedrock dips nearer the waves. As Zealandia's bedrock kept attenuating through epochs, the landmass steadily sagged. This settling varied across regions. Certain zones of Zealandia held higher, yielding isles and uplands. Others plunged further, turning into flooded plateaus. The phenomenon arose from tectonic stretching, crustal heat dissipation, and the burden of seafloor deposits piling up. It proceeded gradually, persistently, and wholly organically. This illustrates how continents, over vast geological epochs, can elevate or descend, not due to climatic shifts, but owing to the shifting plates that bear them. When the final ice age concluded and oceans swelled, Zealandia was already largely underwater for tens of millions of years prior. The 120-meter post-glacial surge that inundated Sunderland and Dogland had little effect on Zealandia. It lay so profoundly under the surface that the extra water hardly made a difference. Zealandia's tale matters not because people saw its submersion. They didn't, but because it underscores a key truth. Continents are capable of sinking below sea level. The notion that land masses on the scale of India or Australia must always protrude above the waves is misguided. Zealandia disproves it. Geologically, a continent can lurk almost wholly submerged, its existence revealed solely via meticulous analysis of the ocean bottom's geology and makeup. Such findings influence the hunt for additional sunken territories. If an immense, age-old land like Zealandia escaped detection until the 21st century, what other secrets might the seas conceal? Continental shelves, the flooded margins of land masses, are charted in detail, yet they remain relatively shallow, often under 200 meters. Zealandia plunges to much greater depths. It isn't merely a shelf. It's a complete continent that foundered, not from advancing seas, but from descending bedrock. Uncovering Zealandia reshaped geologists' views on separating continents from seabeds. The classic image of 7 prominent land masses emerging from the water proved inadequate. Our planet boasts 8 continents, with one nearly fully immersed. In exploring flood legends and vanished realms from human recollection, Zealandia stands apart. It hosted no human populations. Its submergence fell outside the bounds of recorded history. No folklore recalls it, as no people ever dwelt upon it once it sank. Its relevance lies elsewhere. Zealandia shows that the Earth's terrain isn't static. Land masses ascend and subside. Today's dry ground could submerge by tomorrow, or in 1,000,000 years. What lies submerged now might once have stood exposed in antiquity. The globe's exterior is ever-changing, molded by processes spanning eons beyond human societies, while also influenced by quicker agents like retreating glaciers that reshape shores across mere lifetimes. The divergence between Zealandia and Sunderland offers valuable insight. Sunderland vanished in about 10,000 years, a pace swift enough for witnesses to note and recount the transformation. Zealandia's descent spanned 80 million years, gradual enough that, even if life forms were present to watch, no single era would perceive the shift. Each qualifies as a submerged continent. Each is factual, yet their narratives unfold across wholly distinct timelines. Probing Zealandia also uncovered a surprise regarding continental bedrock. As scientists delineated its boundaries, they noted its crust, continental in nature, was slimmer than usual. This attenuation, resulting from tectonic pull, enabled its downturn. The revelation implies that certain oceanic zones worldwide where the crust defies simple categorization as continental or oceanic could represent relics of bygone lands pulled thin and buried out of sight. A prime example is Mauritius, the microcontinent identified in 2013 under the Indian Ocean, with vestiges appearing in zircon crystals scooped from the seabed near Mauritius. Mauritius, akin to Zealandia, splintered from Gondwana, wandered off, and descended. Its presence affirms that minor continents can vanish completely, surviving only as subtle hints entombed under fresh lava layers. With Mauritius and Zealandia in evidence, more such features likely await discovery. The deep seas lack comprehensive high-resolution surveys to spot them. Vast swaths of the abyss stay unprobed. The prospect of further lost continents, grand or modest, concealed under the briny depths, isn't mere conjecture. It's a logical extension of existing evidence. Zealandia won't resurface. The forces that dragged it down won't reverse within human lifespans. Absent a cataclysmic upheaval, like an asteroid strike or a supervolcano overhaul of the Pacific, it will stay hidden for millions more years. Its peaks will wear away. Sedimentary layers will build up. Its form will fade as the divide between land and seafloor softens. Still, Zealandia persists as proof that global topography deceives the eye. In the Pacific's depths, a continent conceals itself. In the Indian Oceans, shards of another. Under the calm waters of Southeast Asia's shallow seas and the North Sea, lie the submerged flatlands of Sunderland and Dogland, remnants not from ancient geological epochs but from the not-so-distant past, still echoing within the span of human recollection. Not every sunken territory unfolded gradually or in balmy, verdant settings. Certain ones were stark, icy, devoid of trees. Others spanned divides between land masses now divided by frigid waters. Our exploration now turns to one such place, a vast expanse that linked two realms and reshaped the trajectory of humankind. Beringia offered no verdant paradise. It stood barren in its chill, battered by relentless winds, without forests and locked in ice for much of the year. Still, life pulsed through it. In the grip of the final ice age, as oceans receded and a pathway surfaced between Asia and North America, This region hosted one of the planet's most vibrant biological networks. An immense steppe, alive with megafauna, spanned about 1,000 miles from north to south over the site of today's Bering Strait. This terrain joined Siberia to Alaska, transforming what is now a watery divide, the slim passage that parts Russia from the United States at a mere 55 miles across its narrowest span, into firm earth. That strait runs shallow, typically just 30 to 50 meters deep. During the peak of the last glacial period, when worldwide sea levels plunged over 100 meters, the ocean bed surfaced, forging an unbroken stretch of territory between the continents. Beringia wasn't some slim pathway. It formed a formidable expanse, a broad plain, reaching from Siberia's Lena River all the way to Canada's Mackenzie River. The uncovered area encompassed not only the current strait, but wide belts of continental shelf on either side, sometimes stretching broader than the span from New York to Chicago. Conditions there were unforgiving. Enormous ice sheets blanketed large swaths of North America and northern Europe throughout the Ice Age. Yet Beringia escaped full glaciation. The air was simply too frigid and arid to nurture massive frozen expanses. Rainfall was scarce. Any snow that arrived either evaporated in the biting gales or thawed amid fleeting summer warmth. The soil lay as permafrost, solidly frozen throughout the seasons, with just a slim surface layer softening in the hottest periods. Even so, Beringia defied desolation. Ecologists term it a mammoth steppe, a frigid grassland habitat, unseen today in its pure state anywhere. Grasses, sedges, and modest bushes blanketed the ground. These flora thrived in the freeze, sprouting swiftly under the endless summer daylight, then hunkering down with root-stored reserves to endure the endless winter night. Such vegetation nourished plant-eaters. Enormous groups of creatures roamed the open fields. Mammoths, the emblematic megafauna of that era, traversed Beringia in multitudes, perhaps matching the wildebeest treks of Africa's savannas today. Woolly rhinos, steppe bison, feral horses, musk oxen, and enormous ground sloths inhabited the revealed terrain. Carnivores trailed in their wake: cave lions, short-faced bears, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats. Scavengers like wolverines, foxes, and ravens picked over the leftovers. The system's bounty stemmed from the cool, arid conditions that locked vital elements into the earth. Grasses flourished thickly, sustaining hefty grazers that bulked up on fat for the lean times ahead. Far from a fringe outpost, this was a flourishing domain, able to sustain throngs of wildlife over vast expanses. People called it home as well. Scholars debate the precise moment of humanity's debut there, but clues from genetics, digs, and language point to arrivals by at least 15,000 years back, and maybe sooner. These weren't settled farmers or urbanites. They were nomadic foragers and hunters, roving after bison and mammoth packs over the steppes, angling in the waterways, and collecting whatever hardy edibles the land yielded. Originating from Siberia, they stemmed from groups honed by survival in Earth's iciest peopled zones. They carried apt inventions, fitted garb from hides, gear for taking down big prey, ways to cure flesh and render fats, and savvy for crafting wind and frost-resistant dwellings. Eventually, bands of them ventured southward. Motives remain murky. They might have tracked migrating beasts. Overcrowding in Beringia could have spurred quests for fresh grounds. Or it was innate wanderlust, that drive to probe what awaits over the next ridge. Southward stretched the colossal Laurentide and Cordilleran glaciers, smothering much of modern-day Canada. For ages during the Ice Age, these frozen walls sealed off North America's heartland. But windows eventually cracked open. At times, a clear path snaked between the ice lobes, permitting inland passage. At others, the Pacific margin cleared as glaciers pulled back from the coast, opening a seaside path. Mounting proof favors the shoreline option. These early migrants possessed seafaring craft. People skilled in coastal navigation gathered seafood like fish, shellfish, seals, and seabirds while traveling along shorelines. Even with its chilly climate, the Pacific shoreline provided plentiful sustenance for those adept at utilizing its offerings. Excavations on North America's western edge, many now underwater from rising seas after the glaciers receded, indicate that early arrivals journeyed southward by the coast, leaping from island to island and trailing the lush kelp groves in those fertile seas. Around 14,000 years ago, settlers had penetrated deep into North America's heartland. By 13,000 years ago, they had fanned out across the landmass extending all the way to Chile in the south. In an astonishingly brief period, possibly just 2,000 years, descendants from Beringia had populated two vast continents, adjusting to everything from frozen tundra to lush tropical jungles. This epic journey, among humanity's most monumental migrations, owed its success to the land bridge. Absent Beringia, the Americas could have stayed empty of human presence for far longer, or perhaps indefinitely. That fleeting, unforgiving link between Asia and North America served as the portal for a whole lineage of people to step into an untouched realm. Eventually, that portal vanished. About 11,000 years ago, with the ice caps thawing and oceans swelling, Beringia started to submerge. The inundation began slowly, then surged during sudden bursts of meltwater. The flatlands flanking today's strait were the initial casualties, overwhelmed by encroaching Pacific and Arctic tides. Over time, the bridge shrank steadily, dwindling to a string of islets. In the end, those too sank beneath the waves. By 10,000 years ago, the Bering Strait had taken on its current shape. Asia and North America stood divided by sea once more. The tie that had endured for millennia, channeling beasts and humans across borders, was broken. Those who had ventured into the Americas found themselves stranded, detached from their forebears' origins. Beringia's submersion rippled through history. The megafauna that flourished on the Mammoth Steppe started to fade. Mammoths, which had wandered from Spain to Alaska, died out entirely. The woolly rhinoceros vanished. Steppe bison, horses, and camels, longtime residents of North America spanning millions of years, disappeared from the landscape. Certain die-offs probably stemmed from shifting climates and habitat loss as the steppe habitats morphed into woodlands and marshes. Human predation might have sped up others. For the newcomers in the Americas, Beringia's flooding sealed a lasting divide. Over the following 10,000 years, American societies evolved separately from Asian ones, forging unique cultures, tongues, and empires. When Europeans set foot in the Americas during the late 15th century, they met communities that had been cut off from Eurasia for over 10,000 years. Groups unfamiliar with horses, without iron tools, and bearing no recollection of the ancient homeland. Unlike Sundaland or Doggerland, Beringia stood apart in a crucial way. It wasn't a hub of urban life. It functioned as a thoroughfare, a transient pathway. Its inhabitants passed through without rooting down. No ancient metropolises lie buried under the Bering Strait. No signs of advanced cultures wiped out by encroaching waters. Beringia's true importance rests not on what vanished, but on the possibilities it unlocked. Still, it's intriguing to ponder what traces lingered in collective recall. Might those who traversed Beringia have retained some awareness that their forebears had trekked between continents over solid ground? Could descendants in Alaska or Siberia have shared tales of an era when the strait could be crossed afoot, when the terrain stretched beyond today's boundaries? No concrete proof survives of such narratives. Indigenous oral histories from the Bering Strait area lack clear mentions of a land-linked past, yet they brim with accounts of massive deluges, sunken territories, and forebears enduring world-altering upheavals. These might simply be widespread flood legends or faint remnants of actual occurrences, the sort of enduring recollections that Australian Aboriginals held on to for 10,000 years. Glimpses of a transformed planet, altered irrevocably, surviving only in scattered retellings. Beringia underscores that the submerged realms we've explored, Sundaland, Doggerland, Zealandia, and this icy expanse, are far from mere footnotes in the past. They molded our present reality, the spread of human groups, the rise of societies, the varied genetics and speech patterns among today's populations. Every aspect traces back to vanished territories, flooded shores, and broken links forged when glaciers retreated and waters climbed. These lost domains aren't relics of some remote geologic epoch. They're woven into the fabric of our shared story. These submerged landscapes are quite modern in geological terms, with some vanishing within the time frame of documented human history and others extending just past its edges. Discoveries continue to surface even today. Over the last several years, advancements in underwater archaeology have gained momentum. Innovations in technology, refined techniques, and pressing concerns from climate shifts and coastal construction projects have sparked a wave of revelations. From submerged buildings and implements to entire villages and traces of daily existence on territories now underwater, these finds are rising from the ocean floor. The narrative of these vanished territories remains ongoing, actively unfolding as scientists hurry to chart and investigate the hidden underwater realms before environmental changes or human activities erase them. The following section delves into these fresh revelations, highlighting the pivotal advancements of 2024 and 2025 that edge us nearer to grasping the losses inflicted by ascending waters. In just the last 2 years, underwater archaeological breakthroughs tied to these flooded terrains have outpaced those from the prior decade combined. Enhanced tools, greater financial support, and the imperative spurred by marine expansion have quickened the rhythm of investigation. What once proceeded as a deliberate step-by-step effort in surveying and theorizing has transformed into an urgent drive to record and interpret locations prior to their modification or obliteration. These findings stretch across various land masses and eras, yet they weave a unified theme. They affirm that these underwater expanses once teemed with life, that communities thrived on the bared continental margins through the Ice Age and into the initial post-ice era, and that remnants of those existences persist below the surface, provided we search in the right spots. Back in December 2024, experts revealed the verification of a 7,000-year-old stone barrier located offshore from Brittany, France. Situated 9 meters underwater, close to the Ile d'Isère, a modest islet at Brittany's western extremity, the barrier measures roughly 120 meters in length, assembled from stones deliberately arranged in a pattern unmistakably shaped by human hands, distinct from random natural debris. Initially spotted in 2017 via sonar scans during a comprehensive seafloor mapping initiative around Britain's shores, the images captured a precise, elongated shape, far more orderly than the usual jumbled seabed boulders. Though the oddity caught notice then, follow-up probes were stalled by limited means. By 2022, divers from the French National Institute for the Preventive Archaeological Research ventured down to examine it firsthand. Their observations validated the sonar data. An intentional, manually crafted edifice, now lost to the depths. The rocks weren't enormous. None exceeded a few hundred kilograms in weight. Yet they were meticulously set to form an unbroken enclosure. Debates persist over its function. Some speculate it functioned as a fishware, a contraption meant to ensnare fish during ebb tides. Others propose it acted as a defensive rampart for a seaside community, safeguarding dwellings or cultivated plots against fierce tidal assaults. Analysis, through radiocarbon dating of organic remnants embedded in the surrounding silt, dated its building to around 5000 BC, in the Neolithic era, when ocean levels neared modern marks but continued a gradual ascent. Beyond its antiquity, the site's placement drew widespread interest. Brittany harbors the tale of Wise, among Europe's most renowned myths of a sunken metropolis. Folklore recounts Wise as a splendid coastal hub, safeguarded by a mighty embankment featuring portals that unlocked solely at low tide. King Gradlin reigned there until a demon beguiled his daughter Dahut, who misplaced the gate key. High tide breached the openings, unleashing a deluge that engulfed the city. Sole survivor Gradlon fled, urged by heavenly forces to forsake his offspring to the flood. For ages the Wise saga has endured, chronicled in Brittany's medieval texts and spoken lore. Scholars long relegated it to mere invention, a cautionary fable on vice and retribution. Unearthing this 7,000-year-old stone wall under the seas proximate to Ilisan doesn't validate the mythic Wise in every detail, yet it hints that the story might stem from tangible constructs, actual habitations, and genuine occurrences. Seaside groups dwelling on territories now inundated, fortified by barriers and levees, ultimately succumb to encroaching tides. Just 3 months later, in August 2025, investigators in Denmark's Bay of Aarhus uncovered another key artifact cluster. At a depth of 25 feet within strata from 6,500 BC, the team extracted stone implements, faunal remains, a sealed tooth, and bits of fashioned timber. This spot seems to mark the vestiges of a Mesolithic outpost, inhabited while the zone remained above water. Peter Moastrup, a principal investigator, called it a preserved snapshot of the era. The relics endured in excellent condition, shielded by silt deposits that built up post-inundation. The flint blades, scrapers, and stone implements aligned closely with the Maglemosian tradition, which thrived in that area toward the end of the Mesolithic era. Among the bones were those from red deer and wild boar, animals that once roamed the woodlands and marshes, covering today's seabed in the North Sea and Baltic regions. A seal's tooth pointed to coastal foraging, with locals pursuing seals in estuaries or along shorelines. Especially noteworthy was the preserved timber. Such organic remains seldom endure millennia beneath the waves without perfect preservation conditions, like minimal oxygen, chilly waters, and swift sediment coverage. Finding manipulated wood there hinted at timber-built shelters or implements, even if erosion had erased their precise shapes. This find bolsters the expanding proof of extensive Mesolithic settlements on territories now flooded near Denmark. Paired with the 2024 Baltic Stone Wall, a half-mile expanse built from over 1,600 rocks forming a hunting enclosure. It depicts a territory far from an empty, untamed expanse, but rather one shaped and utilized by human communities. That Baltic structure, unveiled earlier in 2024, earned a spot among the year's top 10 archaeological breakthroughs. Its importance stems not only from its age exceeding 10,000 years, but from the insights it offers into the skills of Ice Age foragers. Erecting it demanded foresight, effort, and collaboration, pointing to structured societies that tackled communal endeavors spanning seasons or even lifetimes, not mere scattered groups. The revelation has led scholars to challenge old views of Mesolithic life. Far from rudimentary survivors scraping by without strategy or environmental tweaks, these groups showed complexity, environmental savvy, and ingenuity in addressing challenges like optimizing hunts or handling resources. That their grandest creations now rest hidden below water, for so long out of sight and reach, has distorted our grasp of their accomplishments. On another front, the Subnautica initiative, kicked off in 2024, is gaining momentum. This €11.5 million effort aims to probe over 20 locations in the North Sea, employing AI-enhanced sonar scans to pinpoint spots ripe for historical digs. Initial expeditions in late 2024 and early 2025 have prioritized charting and sediment coring over digs. The aim: compile a full catalog of underwater locales to select those warranting deeper exploration. Vince Gaffney, a key figure in the project, emphasized how near they are to spotting permanent villages, enduring habitations, beyond fleeting hunt spots or fishing outposts. The scans have uncovered intriguing formations, potential shell middens in the form of heaps, pit-like hollows that could mark house foundations, and straighter-than-natural waterways. Yet urgency looms large. Development of offshore wind arrays is ramping up swiftly, with yearly surveys, dredging, and installations altering the seabed. Any disruption risks erasing the historical traces forever. Subnautica must hurry to record everything feasible before it's too late. Discoveries aren't limited to Ice Age flooded lands, though. In November 2024, divers in Poland's Lake Lemuria unearthed a millennium-old wooden carving of a face beneath the surface. Roughly 30 centimeters in height, it seems linked to a bigger setup, such as a stake or totem pole. Its traits echo medieval Slavic artistry: simplified, balanced eyes, a bold nose, and a straightforward mouth. The carving's role remains mysterious, perhaps a ritual emblem or guardian figure positioned by a village boundary or lake ford. Comparable items have surfaced at other Eastern European medieval locations, tied to lingering pagan customs that coexisted with emerging Christianity. What makes this find stand out isn't any tie to ancient sea level shifts. Lake Lemuria's depths have held steady for ages, but how it underscores the power of subaquatic digs to unveil hidden slices of the past. Delicate wood pieces, prone to rot above water, can persist for ages in the oxygen-free muck of lake bottoms. A common thread runs through these finds: advancing tech, sonar systems, sub-bottom profilers, core samplers, and ROVs, tools for underwater explorers, are now sharper, more accessible, and cheaper than 10 years back. Financing for such efforts is on the rise. fueled by scholarly curiosity alongside the imperative to evaluate the effects of coastal infrastructure projects. Pressure is building as offshore wind installations, petroleum and natural gas operations, and various industrial ventures infringe upon the underwater heritage sites. Consequently, the pace of discovery is quickening. Additional locations are surfacing. Further constructions are being pinpointed. Greater numbers of relics are being unearthed. The submerged realms, overlooked for years owing to the challenges and costs of investigation, are at last disclosing their hidden tales. Yet destruction accompanies this progress. For each location recorded, countless others perish undiscovered. Trawling vessels persist in hauling gear over the ocean floor, stripping sediments and dispersing relics. Building initiatives disrupt zones potentially harboring ancient communities or edifices. Global warming, via escalating oceans and fiercer tempests, is wearing down stable underwater formations that endured for millennia. The urgent quest to probe these sunken territories transcends mere scholarship. It represents an effort to rescue historical echoes, to reclaim proof of existences on terrains now erased, to grasp the consequences of glacial thaw and oceanic ascent, and to somehow safeguard the narrative of an obliterated era. We have encountered these submerged domains. We have mapped their contours, scrutinized their remnants, and pursued the inhabitants who once thrived there. Places like Sunderland, Dogland, Zealandia, and Beringia each narrate distinct chronicles. Yet collectively, they underscore a vital reality. Our planet has not eternally appeared as it does today, nor will it endure unchanged indefinitely. Shorelines ascend and descend. Territories submerge and resurface. The terrain we consider permanent is fleeting. Molded by dynamics spanning immense eras and abrupt shifts. Now, shifting focus from these territories to the inquiries they provoke. If such realms truly existed, if their residents observed their inundation, how might we align that with ancient lore? In what way do we account for the contrasts between Plato's tale of Atlantis and tangible archaeological findings? How do we interpret the transformation where factual occurrences evolve into folklore and folklore blurs into pure invention? These inquiries form the core of our concluding segment. We shall explore the ties between legend and earth science, the issues surrounding recollection and dissemination, and the broader ramifications of our discoveries. These sunken territories extend beyond mere past events. They serve as a prism for comprehending human remembrance, how societies sustain wisdom, and the fallout when planetary shifts outpace our narratives. The submerged territories are authentic. The legends are timeless. The pivotal issue remains. Do they interlink, and if yes, in what manner? At first glance, the inconsistencies seem overwhelming. Plato situated Atlantis in the Atlantic, past the Strait of Gibraltar. The actual submerged regions we've reviewed, Sunderland, Dogland, Beringia, lie far from any Atlantic proximity. Sunderland resides in Southeast Asia, worlds apart. Dogland rests under the North Sea, on Europe's opposite flank. Beringia bridged Siberia and Alaska, the remotest spot from the Mediterranean without exiting Earth. This locational discord stands as the initial and starkest challenge. Should Atlantis echo recollections of Sunderland or Dogland? How could the narrative journey from Southeast Asia or the North Sea to Egypt, then to Athens, without distorting so severely that essential elements vanished? Plato's depiction incorporates precise attributes: a vast island surpassing Libya and Asia together, ringed waterways, ornate golden shrines, conflict with Athens. Such traits find no parallel in the material traces from these submerged zones. Nevertheless, certain aspects resonate. Plato depicts a domain ravaged by quakes and deluges, vanishing under waves in mere hours. This holds partial truth. The Storega tsunami, battering Dogland circa 8,200 years ago, arrived abruptly and devastatingly. Whole shoreline hamlets might have vanished in mere moments. The meltwater surges. Meltwater pulse, 1A, about 14,500 years ago, and meltwater pulse 1B, roughly 11,500 years ago, lifted sea heights by dozens of meters over mere centuries, rapid enough for shifts to register within one generation. Plato further portrays a society starting noble, yet turning decadent and imperialistic, inviting celestial retribution. Though this moral lens differs from geological fact, it mirrors motifs in numerous deluge tales. The notion of calamity as reprisal for human flaws, regardless of whether Dogland or Sunderland folk viewed their submersion as godly wrath. Those who endured would seek rationale for the calamity. Blaming deities or ethical decline fits naturally in eras lacking grasp of glaciers and tidal mechanics. What Plato captured accurately, beyond flourishes, is the essential sequence. A territory thrived, its people inhabited it, water overwhelmed the land, and that catastrophe lingered in collective memory. The chronology matches up reasonably well, too. According to Plato, the downfall of Atlantis happened 9,000 years prior to his era, dating it to about 9,360 BC. The primary era of flooding after the Ice Age, during which places like Dogland, Sunderland, and Bingia were progressively submerged, spanned from around 18,000 BC to 6,000 BC. The central point in that span, roughly 12,000 to 10,000 BC, aligns fairly closely with the time frame Plato mentioned, where Plato erred was in nearly all other aspects. The site's position is off, particularly if we're viewing it as an account of a particular location. The scale is overstated. Elements like the urban layout, the round metropolis with alternating bands of sea and earth, the shrines decked out in orichalcum, find no echoes in the prehistoric artifacts from Mesolithic Europe or Southeast Asia. The governance he outlines, featuring a dominion over various territories and conflicts with far-off nations, clashes entirely with the modest nomadic bands of foragers who populated those submerged territories. One theory posits that Plato wasn't relaying actual events but crafting a fable instead. That's the prevailing view among academics. Atlantis functioned as an intellectual exercise, allowing Plato to delve into ideas of governance, ethical decline, and the perils of overreach. Its ruin acted as a cautionary tale for Athens regarding its expansive aspirations. The specifics were selected to heighten the drama, not to reflect factual precision. However, this view struggles to explain Plato's firm assertion that the tale was factual, sourced from Solon, who in turn learned it from Egyptian clerics. He deliberately presented it as a historical record, not a symbolic one. So perhaps he genuinely thought it happened, or aimed to convince his audience of its authenticity. Or maybe both. An alternative idea is that Plato's version represents a warped recollection of genuine occurrences, filtered through successive retellings and augmented along the way. This fits better with our understanding of how spoken lore develops over time. A narrative emerges in one society rooted in true happenings. It spreads to another via commerce, movement of peoples, or invasion. The new group modifies it, weaving in their own cultural touches, altering identities, and molding the plot. to suit their perspective. Through repeated cycles, it drifts far from the initial reality. Still, essential motifs persist: a deluge, a vanished territory, those who endured. In such a scenario, situating Atlantis in the Atlantic might just stem from Greek assumptions about where a place like that ought to lie. Given their scant knowledge of the world, they were aware of territories beyond the Mediterranean. They had reports of voyagers heading westward across the Atlantic, discovering isles like the Azores and Canaries, and maybe even whispers of more distant shores carried by Phoenician mariners. Positioning Atlantis past the Pillars of Hercules placed it in the mysterious outer reaches, the frontier of the Greek worldview. The actual submerged area could have been in any corner of the globe. By the point it arrived at Plato, the account had lost its precise geographic ties and been shifted to a believable yet hazy spot. The surviving aspects, the inundation, the devastation, the vanished society, were the universal threads that echoed through different peoples, motifs that any seaside community could grasp, since virtually everyone had faced some degree of the ocean's advance. Lemuria introduces its own challenges. In contrast to Atlantis, which at least started as human folklore, Lemuria began as a scientific concept before being hijacked by occultists and fringe theorists. In 1864, Philip Sclater suggested Lemuria to account for lemur dispersal. Ernst Haeckel claimed it as the origin of humankind. Helena Blavatsky recast it as the cradle of an enlightened people. James Churchward moved it to the Pacific and dubbed it Mu. Solid geology debunks it. No land connection linked Madagascar and India across the Indian Ocean when lemurs first appeared. The spread of lemurs is readily explained by plate tectonics. No lost continent required. Madagascar and India were once joined in Gondwana, the massive ancient landmass, and diverged scores of millions of years back. Lemurs developed separately on Madagascar post-separation. No sunken landmass is needed to justify their existence there. Nevertheless, like Atlantis, Lemuria holds a sliver of validity hidden under heaps of myth. It's not the bridge Sclater envisioned, or the esoteric society Blavatsky fabricated. The reality is that the Indian Ocean's layout has shifted, and minor landmasses can indeed submerge. The 2013 unearthing of Mauritia proved that pieces of continental material do lie under the Indian Ocean, buried through tectonic shifts over eons. Mauritia existed. It was a tiny continent that split from Gondwana, wandered, and eventually submerged. It wasn't Lemuria in the way Sclater portrayed it, nor did people live there. The land sank long before humanity even appeared, yet its reality shows that sunken continents aren't mere inventions. In a similar vein, the ancient Tamil lore of Kumari Kandam, tied to Lemuria by revivalists in the 19th and 20th centuries, could hold echoes of actual shorelines swallowed by the waves. India's southern coastline has transformed dramatically since the Ice Age ended. Rising oceans submerged areas that once stood dry. It's uncertain if Tamil-spoken histories kept exact recollections of these shifts across more than 10,000 years, though it's certainly plausible. After all, indigenous Australians have maintained such knowledge, so why couldn't the Tamils? This trend holds true elsewhere. Legends aren't spot on. They're adorned, moved around, reimagined, and sometimes invented from scratch. Still, they're rooted in truth, drawn from actual ordeals like shoreline inundations, vanished territories, and uprooted communities. The specifics may falter, but the core truth stands firm. That's the crucial realization. Folklore holds onto shapes, not sharp details. It grasps the heart of occurrences, a deluge, a calamity, a vanished realm, without locking in the fine points. Places migrate, eras squeeze together. What spanned ages or eons gets recalled as a one-day drama. Mortal figures morph into deities or champions. Inventions get polished to suit the narrator's vision of a sophisticated society. As generations pass, the tale strays from its source. Every recounting tweaks, drops, or inserts elements. After countless retellings, it might look entirely foreign. But if the narrative matters deeply, tackling core human fears like enduring calamity, it endures. Some threads stay steady because they're timeless. Waters encroaching, earth vanishing, folks escaping, a handful living on to recount it. That's the origin of deluge stories across societies. Not from one identical inundation hitting everywhere, but from every coastal group over the last 20,000 years, facing rising seas in some way. The nuances differ. The divine players, the enduring protagonists, the submerged realms, but the framework spans the world. Plato's Atlantis and Slater's Lemuria stem from this dynamic, their tales woven from slivers of fact, molded by the teller's desires and fancies. Atlantis advanced Plato's ideas on governance. Thus, he tailored it accordingly. Lemuria advanced Slater's scholarly aims, then Blavatsky's mystical ones, and later Tamil nationalists' heritage goals. At every turn, the narrative bent to fresh agendas. For those linking folklore to actual submerged regions, the hurdle lies in peeling back the strata. What's authentic? What's tacked on? What mirrors true happenings? And what stems from the narrator's slants and inventions? Straightforward solutions elude us. We can't rewind to catch the earliest tellings, pre-script, pre-translation, pre-alteration. We're stuck with the end results. Plato's writings, Blavatsky's works, the tales gathered by scholars of lore and custom. From there, we reverse engineer, shedding coatings to reach the kernel. At the heart, it's not some pinpointed sunken metropolis or landmass. It's remembrance. Imprecise, broad remembrance, but remembrance of absence. A era when the landscape differed, when territories thrived that now don't, when the waves lay more distant than today. The sea claimed those spaces. Survivors passed the echo onward. Distorted and woven into legend though it is, that echo lingers. Atlantis embodies it. Lemuria embodies it. All tales of floods, all sagas of lost domains embody it. So the real query isn't whether Atlantis existed as a ringed urban haven with gilded shrines past Gibraltar. No, it didn't. The query is whether these legends recall genuine submerged lands. And yes, they do. Those lands were tangible. Their submersion was tangible. The remembrance, warped though nearly beyond grasp, is tangible. Yet remembrance is delicate. It evolves. It dims. It demands work to sustain. How did these echoes last through myriad generations? What processes let people retain happenings from 10,000 years back? Incidents predating script, urban life, or any formal chronicle we know. That's the puzzle ahead. Remembrance isn't built for forever. Our minds shine at immediate retrieval, where the keys are, breakfast details, yesterday's chat. It's fair for mid-range hold. Youth episodes, old companions' names, pivotal moments. Yet human memory proves vulnerable and inconsistent when tasked with safeguarding knowledge over hundreds of years, much less thousands. A single person's lifespan tops out at about 80 to 100 years. In that time, they might experience occurrences, absorb narratives, and relay them to their descendants. However, Every handover injects inaccuracies. Elements get omitted, backgrounds fade, and fresh details creep in. Initially, the tale evolves gradually, but eventually, after repeated tellings, it can diverge sharply from its origins. This mirrors the classic telephone game, known to partygoers, where a phrase passes quietly from one ear to another in a group. When it arrives at the final listener, it's often twisted or entirely altered. The activity highlights a core flaw in verbal sharing. Details erode over time. Imagine extending that challenge not just across a dozen participants, but over 400 generations. That's the magnitude involved in pondering if echoes of Sunderland's submersion could have filtered down to Plato. The flooding of Sunderland occurred sometime between about 18,000 and 5,000 years ago. Plato composed his works in 360 BC. From the approximate center of Sunderland's inundation, around 11,500 years ago, to Plato's era spans roughly 11,100 years, equivalent to 350 to 400 generations, based on a typical span of 25 to 30 years per generation. That's 400 rounds of the telephone game. 400 chances for alterations, for insertions or deletions, for the essence to morph. It feels utterly implausible that any precise recollection could endure such relentless transmission. Remarkably, though, it has happened. Evidence emerges from indigenous Australian traditions. Aboriginal peoples have inhabited the continent for a minimum of 65,000 years, sustaining one of the planet's most enduring cultural lineages. Their verbal legacies, conveyed through melodies, tales, and rites across the ages, include vivid portrayals of terrains, incidents, and shifts in the environment. For ages, external observers brushed off these accounts as mere legends that changed as scholars cross-referenced them with scientific data from geology. The Narunga of South Australia recount an era when Kangaroo Island linked directly to the continent. Scientific analysis verifies this connection existed until rising oceans severed it roughly 9,000 years ago. Their narrative captured a topographical reality absent for 90 centuries, about 360 generations. The Yolngu in northern Australia speak of expanses that once stretched northward, now dotted with isles. Bathymetric mapping substantiates that, during the Ice Age, those seabed areas surfaced as land, only to sink with elevating seas. The folklore aligned seamlessly with the evidence. Various groups near Spencer Gulf in South Australia describe a period before the Gulf formed, when the region stood as habitable terrain for dwelling and foraging. Per the tales, waters surged in, forming the Gulf. Research in geology upholds that Spencer Gulf remained arid in the latest ice age and flooded around 10,000 years past, some 400 generations back. These aren't ambiguous allegories. They stand as pinpointed chronicles of tangible ecological shifts, retained with striking fidelity over durations that eclipse documented chronicles. How did they achieve this? The secret resides in the framework of indigenous Australian wisdom practices. Knowledge isn't stored as detached data or scripted documents. Instead, it's woven into the very terrain, inscribed within chants, movements, and observances linked to tangible sites. This framework is called song lines. A song line functions as a melodic chronicle, outlining a path through the country. It encodes details on the path, sources of water, plant locales, animal habitats, holy spots, and linked legends for each area. The environment acts as a mnemonic aid. Each ridge, waterway, outcrop, and tree serves as a cue in the sequence, grounding the narrative in the tangible realm. Anchored to the physical setting, The song resists modification. Stray from its words and it clashes with the surroundings. Lose a segment, and traversing the path lets the features jog your recall. The terrain essentially holds the archive, while the song provides the access key. Rituals bolster this approach. Yearly or cyclical gatherings recite the full songs and narratives with unwavering fidelity. The recital demands rigor, not looseness. Seniors instruct the youth, stressing verbatim fidelity over creativity. The aim is safeguarding ancient lore, not inventing fresh ones. Errors get rectified, deviations are reined in. The society prizes unbroken transmission above all, honoring the wisdom inherited from forebears. The integration of place-based anchoring, ritualistic recitation, and a cultural focus on precise handover forms a framework that can sustain knowledge over vast spans of time. It isn't flawless. Specific elements fade away, certain tales evolve. Yet the essential details, the terrain, the key occurrences, the sequence of transformations, endure through countless generations. This explains how indigenous Australians retained awareness that Kangaroo Island once linked to the continent, that Spencer Gulf was dry terrain in the past, and that shorelines differed 10,000 years ago. The approach succeeded. The recollection persisted. However, Indigenous Australia benefited from unique strengths. Their society remained uninterrupted, untouched by invasions or relocations. Their numbers stayed modest and steady, limiting rival versions of events. The environment held firm, with minimal upheavals that could erase prior recollections. And most importantly, their traditions elevated remembrance to a core duty, not a mere choice. Other societies lacked such benefits. Groups moved around, merging or supplanting one another. Invasions and societal disruptions broke the chain of passing down lore. Emerging faiths and perspectives recast ancient narratives, overlaying fresh interpretations on the original happenings. The terrain's inhabitants occupied, shifted, breaking the ties between tales and their locales. Moreover, numerous societies didn't stress fidelity in retelling. Narratives were modified, refreshed, tailored for contemporary listeners, sacrificing accuracy along the way. Consequently, even when echoes of genuine incidents lingered, they morphed significantly. The submersion of Sunderland, if it lingered in the minds of uprooted people's heirs, would have undergone myriad adaptations before arriving in the Mediterranean realm. Should the tale ever have made it to Egyptian priests, its link to the starting geography would have vanished. Particulars would give way to vague deluge motifs. The chronology would shrink or warp. It would dissolve into yet another inundation legend, blending seamlessly with many more unless someone pinpointed its roots. Still, the mere possibility that such a remembrance could persist, albeit altered, implies a degree of cultural depth that skeptics claim was absent in the Mesolithic era. The notion that nomadic foragers in tight-knit groups, lacking urban centers or script, might safeguard intricate data for thousands of years feels far-fetched. But digs reveal a different reality. Take Göbekli Tepe, a location in southeastern Turkey from roughly 11,000 years back, the very era when Doggerland submerged and Sunderland fragmented into isles. Göbekli Tepe features enormous stone pillars etched with detailed animal carvings, grouped in round enclosures. Erecting it demanded foresight, teamwork, and ongoing commitment spanning generations. This wasn't a living area. It served as a sacred hub for rituals, banquets, and shared gatherings. Göbekli Tepe came before farming. Its creators were foragers who didn't cultivate crops, didn't dwell in fixed settlements, and didn't possess the resource excess that fueled grand builds in subsequent eras. Nevertheless, they accomplished it. They rallied, hauled stones weighing tons, sculpted ornate designs, and upheld the complex for ages. This upends the view that societies before agriculture were basic or unequipped for intricate communal structures. Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that 10,000 years ago, people possessed the capacity for extended strategizing, emblematic reasoning, and group efforts on a level once deemed unattainable then. If they erected sanctuaries, they could sustain narratives. If they managed workforce across eras to sustain a holy spot, they could manage the relay of spoken heritage across eras to safeguard recollections. The 2024 Baltic find of the Dogland Wall bolsters this. A half-mile expanse of over 1,600 stones, positioned to guide prey to ambush points, dating beyond 10,000 years. This wasn't haphazard. It was deliberate design. It called for insight into wildlife patterns, grasp of the surroundings, and skill in carrying out a strategy that served not only the makers but also those who followed, relying on it year after year. These folks weren't mere roving foragers drifting without purpose over the land. They were refined, attuned, proficient. If they constructed barriers and shrines, they could maintain remembrances. If they valued the lore, organized it well, and wove it into ceremonies and surroundings, those remembrances could endure. Yet, despite optimal techniques, some exactness inevitably slips away. The Aboriginal songlines from Australia retain the knowledge that Spencer Gulf was inundated and that Kangaroo Island got cut off. Yet they fail to hold on to exact timelines, accurate dimensions, or the identities of those who saw it happen. The overall shape endures. The fine points fade away. That's the reality of recollection spanning vast epochs. It endures, yet only in pieces. The essence sticks, a deluge, a vanished territory, those who made it through, though the particulars shift. Across countless generations, the tale morphs into something different. The submerged shoreline turns into a ringed metropolis. The encroaching waters become a god's wrath. The uprooted groups transform into a mighty empire. The recollection is genuine, but the legend isn't. Thus, when we wonder how the submersion of Sunderland or Doggerland might have evolved into the Atlantis myth, the explanation lies in this mechanism. Via sharing, twisting, enhancement, and shifting through the gradual, unavoidable erosion of memory over ages. Now the follow-up query is, precisely how does a genuine occurrence turn into folklore? What alterations happen during each phase of passing it on? And what insights can we gain by studying the method? Let's trace a potential route from fact to fable. Sunderland is sinking. It's around 11,000 BC. Sea levels have climbed for millennia. Recently, though, the rate has quickened. Shoreline settlements get swamped. Foraging areas turn into brackish wetlands. Waterways alter their paths as deltas shift upstream. The folks dwelling on those vulnerable lowlands, offspring of groups that had called the area home for tens of millennia, find themselves uprooted. Some head to the interior, scaling the heights of Sumatra and Borneo. Others push northward toward present-day mainland Southeast Asia. They bring along tales of submerged realms, of eras when endless flatlands stretched where ocean now rules, traversable on foot for days. These accounts live on in campfire yarns, in ritual chants during gatherings, in cautions handed from grandparents to young ones. The waves claim territory, and they might claim more, as time ticks by. the narratives expand. Folks relocate. Commerce links form. Offspring of Sunderland's displaced meet other groups, exchange their lore, and pick up parallel tales from nearby areas. The minutiae smudge. The precise layout, which stream, gorge, or seaside flat, slips away or merges with distant spots. What persists is the blueprint, a vast expanse now devoured by the deep. Ages roll on. The accounts drift west, borne by merchants, travelers, and nomads. They hit the Indian peninsula. They filter into the Middle East. By 6000 BC, sea routes tie the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and ultimately, the Eastern Mediterranean. Narratives follow these paths, just as readily as cargo. Come 2000 BC. The Eastern Mediterranean buzzes with cultural mingling. Egyptians, Phoenicians, Greeks, and more connect, barter, and swap wisdom. Egypt, steeped in antiquity and rich with archives, serves as a vault for tales from afar. Clerics and copyists gather accounts, weave them into local beliefs, etch them into sacred sites. In about 590 BC, Solon, Athens' reformer, journeys to Egypt. He chats with clerics in the city of Sais. The clerics, keen to flaunt their deeper lore, recount to Solon sagas from antiquity, happenings predating Greek annals. One such saga describes a mighty isle past the ocean to the west, a formidable society that clashed with a primordial Athens and fell to quakes and inundations. Captivated, Solon carries the yarn home to Athens. He plans a grand verse about it but leaves it unfinished. The tale lingers in his lineage. His kin Dropides shares it with son Critias. That Critias passes it to his grandson, another Critias, who pops up in Plato's dialogues. Plato, catching wind from this Critias, folds it into his treatises. When Plato pens Timaeus and Critias circa 360 BC, the root incident, the Sunderland flooding, assuming that's the seed, has crossed some 360 generations. The locale has shifted to the Atlantic, a zone Greeks link to mystery and fable. The chronology has squeezed or warped. The magnitude has ballooned. The civic elements, the layered circles, the dominion, the Athens conflict, get tacked on, perhaps by the Egyptian clerics or Plato to suit the plot's demands. What started as echoes of flooded shores has bloomed into the Atlantis saga. A disc-shaped isle metropolis grander than lands, boasting cutting-edge wonders and ethical decay. Obliterated in one cataclysmic day by heavenly retribution. This stands as a theory. Proof eludes us. The relay chain stretches too far, the clues too sparse, yet it rings true. This process reveals how an actual occurrence might evolve into legend, with specifics shifting over time, while the fundamental motif, terra firma, inhabitants and aqueous devastation, endures. Let's explore an alternative route. About 8,200 years back, the Storegga tsunami hits. Towering waves, meters in height, crash over the flat coastal areas, inundating seaside communities and possibly wiping out a fourth of Britain's Mesolithic dwellers. Those who live through it behold their entire realm crumble in just one day. The seas don't completely pull back. Much of Doggerland, already eroded by thousands of years of ascending ocean levels, stays underwater forever following the surge. The former pathway linking Britain to mainland Europe transforms into a shallow waterway. The people who endure pass down the tale. They recount the swell, its roar, the rapid advance. They mourn the deceased, the erased villages, the territory that dissolved. The narrative is harrowing, etched deeply into collective recall. It's shared repeatedly, a caution, a dirge, a means to comprehend disaster. As eras pass, the account circulates widely. Groups relocate. The offspring of Doggerland's escapees settle in Britain, Scandinavia, and beyond the mainland. They bear the legend along. Yet with dissemination, it sheds precision. The tsunami's particulars, its origin site, precise terrain, fade from mind. What's left is the essence, a massive inundation, earth engulfed by waves, folks who escaped by ascending to elevations. The tale turns archetypal. It blends with fellow deluge chronicles, recollections of swelling tides, other recollections of calamities. When eventually inscribed, be it within the Bible's deluge saga, the Hellenic tale of Deucalion, or Nordic yarns of submerged realms, it's detached from Doggerland. Instead, it captures the shared ordeal of inundation, a motif echoed in every shoreside culture to some degree. Once more, merely a theory. Yet it demonstrates the mechanism transforming history into folklore. Particulars erode. Surroundings vanish. The narrative reshapes to suit emerging societal norms, faiths, ethical teachings. The particular turns broad. The factual morphs into fable. Embellishment unfolds slowly but relentlessly. At every link in the chain, the yarn alters a bit. Picture the progression. First phase. Our Hamlet got swamped. We raced to the elevations. Numerous perished. Second, a vast deluge razed the shoreline outposts. Our forebears endured by retreating inward. Third, eons passed. Oceans ascended and devoured the territories. A mighty society vanished. Fourth, in bygone days, a formidable realm hugged the shore. Deities unleashed a torrent to chastise the folk's depravity. Scant few made it through. Fifth, far off in uncharted expanses lay an insular dominion of immense riches and might. They spurned the divinities. Then in one fell day, the isle perished, plunging under the surf. Each version layers on elements, magnitude, ethical verdict, celestial interveners, structural flourishes. By the last, it's beyond recognition, as a mere Hamlet swamping report. It is transmuted into Atlantis. What drives this? Why do people amplify tales thus? For starters, the urge to rationalize. Disasters crave purpose. A locale submerges, and folks query the cause. Lacking grasp of oceanic escalation, plate shifts or atmospheric shifts, recourse lies elsewhere. The immortals raged. The populace sinned. Existence rebukes arrogance. Such interpretations offer resolution, implying chaos fits a grander ethical scheme. Secondly, the impulse to align the yarn with listeners' worldviews, narrating to urban builders. Elevate the drowned hamlet to a sunken metropolis, to imperial savvy crowds. The outpost swells to an empire. To those prizing bullion and gems, the edifices gleam with orichalcum. The account gains pertinence, grandeur, retellability. Thirdly, mere lapses in recall. Elements slip away. Fabrications plug voids. The site's moniker evaporates, so a fresh one emerges. The spot blurs, so it's slotted into a suiting locale. The chronology fogs, so it's vaguely, quote, one or quote two across countless lineages. These tweaks build up. The legend veers ever from its roots. In time, it alchemizes into wholly novel form. A saga, a mythos, a narrative seemingly unmoored from truth, purely imagined. Still, the archetype lingers. Deluge lore spans societies because deluges struck. Yarns of engulfed domains endure because domains sank. The fables lack fidelity, yet they're grounded in reality. Take a contemporary case. On December 26th, 2004, a colossal submarine quake near Sumatra unleashed a tsunami that claimed over 230,000 lives in 14 nations. In certain areas, those waves soared up to 30 meters high. Whole seaside villages were wiped out completely. The catastrophe was captured in detail through satellite photos, videos, survivor testimonies, and expert data collection. Still, despite this wealth of evidence, mystical interpretations surfaced right away. Various groups blamed the tsunami on godly retribution for ethical lapses. Some interpreted it as a harbinger of the end times. Long-held spiritual views from animism to organized faith were called upon to make sense of the tragedy's origins. Even though the trigger was plainly a tectonic shift in a subduction zone, folks couldn't help turning to interpretations outside pure science for deeper purpose. Picture, now if that same 2004 disaster had struck 10,000 years back in an era without written records, without worldwide networks, without grasp of continental drift. Envision the eyewitnesses passing the tale to their offspring who shared it with the next wave over 400 ancestral lines. How might that account evolve? It would likely shed the exact timing. The precise spot could shift. The magnitude might swell or shrink in retelling. The explanation would undoubtedly turn legendary. Wrath of the gods, societal decay, disharmony in the universe. Those who lived through it could rise to legendary status or holy figures. The victims might get cast as wrongdoers or pure souls, shaped by the storyteller's ethical lens. When the narrative finally hit the ears of someone like Plato, 400 generations later, drawing from distant lands handed-down lore, it would stand as pure mythology. And scholars probing its roots in actual history would grapple with hurdles much like ours today in debating Atlantis's existence. That's the essence of legend building. Rarely from outright invention, though that happens too, but more often via the gradual erosion of recollection, the handoff through societies, and the reshaping of tales. Actual happenings morph into accounts. Accounts into folklore, folklore into enduring myths. Myths, after ages, blend seamlessly with made-up tales unless you dig precisely, cross-reference wisely, and peel back the embellishments. Atlantis arose this way, as did Lemuria, along with the deluge stories echoed in cultures worldwide. They're not made from scratch. They're echoes, warped past easy knowing, yet anchored in genuine occurrences. So the real puzzle isn't if these tales hold literal truth. They don't. It's what their presence reveals about our surroundings, our buried past, and the perils ahead. That's where our exploration heads now. What does it signify if Atlantis, Lemuria, and global flood legends are warped recollections of truly submerged territories? It signals a trade-off. We forfeit the enchanting tale of a vanished supreme society, far surpassing our tech, brimming with insights and might that today's world has misplaced. That's pure invention. No energy crystals, no aerial craft, no mind powers, no alien visitors, no otherworldly mentors, no concealed lore tucked in monuments or shrines. The inhabitants of Sunderland, Dogland, and Bingia were foragers and nascent farmers wielding stone implements, dwelling in tight-knit groups that followed nature's rhythms. This dims the spark for anyone drawn to visions of humanity's past pinnacle, followed by a tumble. It topples the story that old civilizations held mysteries we've squandered, a bygone era of splendor from which we've slid. It strips the enigma, the charm, the dreamlike pull. Yet we acquire something profoundly richer. We forge links. Those on the sunken realms weren't ethereal figures from a faded epoch. They were everyday people akin to ourselves, tackling nature's trials, adjusting to shifts, outlasting calamities, safeguarding recollections. Gazing upon Dogland's underwater woods or Sunderland's flooded streams, we peer into our forebears' actual dwellings, not poetically, but factually. These were tangible folks leading authentic existences, enduring true grief. We uncover evidence of endurance. Humankind weathered the inundation of vast land masses spanning millions of square kilometers. Groups were uprooted. Whole terrains vanished. Still, our species pressed on. Those who made it through adjusted, relocated, restarted. Their biological and societal inheritance echoes in every lineage tied to zones hit by rising seas after the ice melted. Our present stems from their perseverance. We attain richer insight into the past. The notion that societies before farming were simplistic, lacking depth in ideas or foresight, crumbles amid finds like Göbekli and feats like the Baltic Wall. 11,000 years passed. People were erecting sacred sites and crafting elaborate traps that demanded teamwork, expertise, and foresight. Far from roaming without purpose, these ancient inhabitants were actively molding their environment, forging significance, and safeguarding wisdom. The lack of urban centers or written scripts doesn't imply a shortfall in complexity. This offers a striking mirror to our own era. Ice Age communities endured environmental shifts on an unimaginable scale. Spanning about 10,000 years between 18,000 BC and 8,000 BC, ocean levels surged over 120 meters. Long-established shorelines dissolved into oblivion. The planet's very layout transformed. Vast habitats, the Mammoth Steppe, the bared continental shelves, the Sunderland River valleys, vanished entirely. Those who navigated this era held no power against it. They hadn't triggered the glacier's thaw. They couldn't halt the encroaching waters. Instead, they stood as helpless observers to immense incomprehensible powers, adjusting where possible, relocating as needed, and grieving the irreplaceable losses. In contrast, we aren't mere bystanders. Today's climate crisis stems directly from our actions. The combustion of fossil fuels, the emission of greenhouse gases, the disruption of terrestrial and marine ecosystems. These represent deliberate decisions, both shared and personal, that are remaking Earth. Oceans are climbing once more, not with the velocity of those ancient meltwater surges, yet swiftly enough to prompt defenses in seaside metropolises, constructing barriers, contemplating withdrawals. The vulnerable urban hubs aren't mere hamlets. They're colossal metropolises like Miami, New York, Shanghai, Mumbai, Jakarta, Lagos. Scores of millions dwell in shoreline areas poised for peril from escalating seas in the coming century. Should trends persist, key sections of these places could submerge by 2100 or soon after. If Greenland's and Antarctica's ice masses disintegrate quicker than forecasted, a scenario we can't dismiss, the flooding might prove devastating. Picture, briefly, what lies ahead. 2 millennia onward, explorers plunging into Florida's nearshore shallows unearth Miami's submerged relics. They uncover bases of towering buildings, flooded expressways, echoes of an expansive city grid now claimed by reefs and silt. They salvage relics, smartphones, vehicles, plastic containers, signaling a high-tech culture. No documents endure, as paper is decayed and electronic archives have crumbled. What conclusions will they draw? Might they grasp that Miami succumbed to human-fueled sea rise? Or will they weave tales to account for it? Retribution from deities, ethical decline, a society that provoked the heavens and got devoured by the deep. Should such legends arise, will later descendants accept them as truth or reject them as mere fable? Much like our long-standing dismissal of Atlantis, we might be birthing tomorrow's Atlantis. The shoreline strongholds we're erecting now, the existences we pursue there, the societies we assemble. These may evolve into the submerged realms that ensuing generations probe, the sagas that subsequent societies recount, the enigmas that later scholars labor to decipher. Yet the parallels aren't exact. Ice Age folk didn't spark their rising tides. We ignite ours. They possessed no means to avert it. We possess such means. Their legacy consisted of flint implements and timber edifices. Ours will endure in concrete, metal, and synthetics, substances built to last eons. The traces we etch will dwarf the offerings of Doggerland or Sunderland in depth. Still, the archetype endures. Shoreline dwellers uprooted, territories engulfed, refugees in flight, recollections retained but warped and legendary. Should our society crumble, should texts vanish, should the thread of learning snap, posterity might regard us as we regard Atlantis. A narrative faintly recalled exaggerated past truth, contested by experts pondering our very existence. Grasping the depth of sophistication is key to unraveling these submerged realms. For ages, the view held that societies before farming were basic, devoid of the structure, insight, or drive for grand endeavors. Göbekli Tepe's unearthing upended that notion. This sanctuary, erected 11,000 years back by foragers who hadn't tamed crops or livestock, demanded foresight, toil, and multi-generational commitment. The location proves quote underscore 3, underscore an inaccurate label. These folks weren't rudimentary. They were attuned, proficient, and resourceful. The Baltic Wall bolsters the argument. This half-mile array of over 1,600 precisely arranged boulders, crafted to channel prey to ambush points, isn't the output of crude mines. It reveals terrain stewardship, tactical acumen, and group synergy. That it dates back 10,000 years, to a time prior to farming, literacy, or metalworking, doesn't lessen its importance. Rather, it heightens it. If the inhabitants of Dogland and Sunderland could accomplish such engineering, what other accomplishments might they have achieved? The answers elude us. Our records are incomplete and scattered. Significant portions lie submerged beneath the sea. Others have been ravaged by trawlers or concealed under layers of silt. Gone are the days when we could dismiss them as simple nomadic foragers, devoid of intricate social structures or meaningful cultural developments. This discovery highlights a key issue: the bias in what survives. The submerged territories we've explored, Sunderland, Dogland, Beringia, Zealandia, represent just those we've identified through surveys and analysis. Countless more likely lurk undetected. The continental shelves, those flooded continental margins, span about 7% of the ocean floor. The majority sits at depths under 200 meters, putting it within reach for subaquatic digs, albeit challenging and costly. Yet within that 7%, a mere sliver has undergone the detailed scanning needed to spot relics such as rock barriers, fire pits, or clusters of implements. Enormous stretches of these shelves stay uncharted, unexamined, and enigmatic. How many Dogger-like realms hide under the surface? How many Göbekli Tepe equivalents rest underwater? Their megaliths shrouded in mud, their value overlooked. The Baltic Wall surfaced by chance amid a standard sonar scan for unrelated goals. The Brittany Wall emerged in view only because scientists targeted irregularities in the bathymetric readings. Without deliberate searches, discoveries stay buried, and opportunities for such finds are narrowing rapidly. Coastal wind installations, petroleum and natural gas setups, submarine wiring, and commercial fishing are increasingly disrupting the seabed. Annually, portions of the historical archive get modified or obliterated. Efforts like the Subnautica Initiative and their counterparts hurry to catalog remnants before they're gone forever. From scrutinizing the legends, landforms, digs, and oral traditions, one clear conclusion emerges. Those sunken territories existed. Their residents did too. The disaster that uprooted them happened. The recollections they passed down persisted, albeit warped by generations and retellings. What proves illusory is the myth-making. No opulent Atlantis boasting gilded shrines and superior gadgets. No Lemuria peopled by colossal beings wielding mental abilities. No extraterrestrial visitors, no vanished insights, no concealed lore poised for revival. Just human beings. Folks settle along shorelines, constructing shelters, nurturing families, sharing tales. Folks observing the waters creep upward gradually, then surge. Folks retreating to higher ground, salvaging possessions where possible, abandoning the rest. Folks enduring, evolving, holding on to the past. Reality humbles more than imagination. It withholds hidden truths or wondrous innovations. Instead, it presents a looking glass. In those flooded domains, we glimpse our own image. Shoreline communities exposed to uncontrollable elements. Societies we erect that might not endure as we'd wish. Legacies we forge that could outlast our settlements, yet fail to curb our arrogance. Under the ocean, clues patiently await. Hearths extinguished for 10,000 years. Lithic artifacts strewn over the bottom. Traces of steps in waterlogged clay. Barriers erected for trapping seafood or directing prey. Woodlands inundated intact, their trunks anchored in bygone earth. These aren't tributes to a vanished era of glory. They're echoes of everyday existences amid remarkable trials, safeguarded by the very depths that claim them. They demonstrate that the planet has transformed previously, that our species has weathered those shifts, and that echoes of grief, scattered and fable-woven, can persist over epochs that eclipse our written annals. Now the challenge lies in how we apply this awareness. Down in the depths, a ledger of vanished places. Sunderland, 1.85 million square kilometers, submerged from 18,000 to 5,000 years past. A territory bigger than Mexico, linking isles now divided by gentle waters. Its woodlands, streams, and littoral expanses erased. Residents uprooted, merged into upland groups, or faded from history. Any lingering trace of that realm endures barely in shards, in narratives so twisted we can't identify them as factual accounts. Doggerland, 46,620 square kilometers, the prime Mesolithic hub for pursuit and angling in Europe, now sunk under the North Sea. The bridge joining Britain to the mainland, broken by encroaching tides and rocked by the Storegga tsunami 8,200 years ago. Hamlets, encampments, existences along its waterways and edges wiped away. Sole survivors, the relics, hauled by trawlers, spotted by subaqueous explorers, suggesting a realm that's vanished. Zealandia spans 4.9 million square kilometers, with 94% of it submerged, forming a continent concealed right under the surface of the Pacific Ocean. It subsided gradually across tens of millions of years, well before humanity ever set foot on the planet. Its submersion went unseen by any eyes. No recollections endure, yet it validates the idea. Entire land masses can vanish, not through sudden disaster, but via the steady, unyielding processes of geological change. Beringia, the bridge of land linking Asia and North America, surfaced amid the Ice Age and vanished underwater around 11,000 years ago. The vast mammoth plains, the roaming herds, the migrants traversing between continents all disappeared. Links between peoples broke apart. Groups became cut off, and any remembrance of an era when land connected faded into mere whispers, preserved in ancient tales. Combine these, and the figure reaches millions of square kilometers. Factor in the submerged continental shelves along the shores of Australia, South America, Africa, Antarctica, and the sum climbs even further. That's 7.7 million square miles of terrain, laid bare in the Ice Age, now lost below the waves. Space equivalent to twice Canada's expanse, surpassing South America's size, claimed by advancing waters. Far from barren, this territory teemed with life. Coastal zones drew human settlements, supporting fishing, hunting, and foraging. River basins and estuaries brimmed with bounty, offering abundant sustenance. These submerged areas weren't peripheral. They represented the most fertile habitats available then for contemporary societies. How many individuals were uprooted? The exact count eludes us. Mesolithic and late Paleolithic groups were modest compared to today's numbers, totaling maybe a few million worldwide. Yet when such communities clustered along shorelines, their loss to encroaching seas struck hard. Projections indicate that tens of thousands, or possibly hundreds of thousands, felt the direct brunt from the inundation of Sundaland and Doggerland by themselves. The worldwide impact remains elusive, though undeniably profound. What vanished alongside those communities? Languages, without doubt. The Mesolithic era buzzed with linguistic variety, each clan or group voicing its unique dialect, separate from those nearby. Displacement, blending, or extinction of groups meant their speech vanished too. Innovations faded away. Techniques for crafting tools, approaches to pursuit or angling. Insights into local flora and fauna tied to those vanished zones. All gone. Spoken histories dissolved. Tales and melodies handed down through ages, wiped out when the final teller passed without heirs to carry them. Scant remnants linger, traces in the genes of today's descendants. Relics unearthed in digs like stone implements, sunken woodlands, and flooded barriers. Warped recollections reshaped into legends, hardly traceable back to their factual origins. Yet the narrative persists. Annually, fresh revelations surface. The 2024 Baltic Wall, ranking among the top 10 archaeological breakthroughs, revealed advanced constructions from 10,000 years past. The 2024 Brittany Wall, lying underwater near France's shore, reignited fascination with the tale of Wise and underscored that familiar coastlines still conceal mysteries. The 2025 Denmark Settlement, a Mesolithic preserve under the Bay of Aarhus, illustrated how the submerged realm continues to divulge clues. The Subnautica initiative, started in 2024, hurries to survey and record North Sea locations ahead of harm from marine projects. Similar efforts advance in Southeast Asia, the Mediterranean, the Baltic. Technology advances apace, sonar systems, artificial intelligence, core sampling, unmanned submersibles. Support grows, fueled by scholarly curiosity and awareness of the vulnerable underwater heritage at risk. Further finds lie ahead. Villages, artifacts, fire pits, skeletal traces. Proof of existences on vanished terrains will resurface. Our view of that sunken domain sharpens. Though it can never fully sharpen, irretrievable losses abound. Too much rests too profoundly, smothered in silt, out of reach, or already ravaged by trawlers and building works. Thus, we circle back to the query that sparked this exploration. Do Atlantis and Lemuria echo actual submerged territories? The response blends affirmation, denial, and uncertainty. Affirmative, because genuine landscapes did submerge. Sunderland, Doggerland, Beringia, and more hosted living societies, overtaken by swelling oceans. The sudden deluges in folklore, the one-day cataclysm of engulfment, mirror occurrences like the Storegga tsunami. The chronology loosely matches the aftermath of glaciation. The dynamics of uprooting, endurance, and cultural retention fit patterns in verbal histories. These legends spring from tangible roots. Negative, because no legend precisely maps to a particular flooded area. Plato's Atlantis, with its ringed metropolis. Ornate shrines, sprawling dominion, lacks any match in discovered evidence. Lemuria, as envisioned by Blavatsky or expanded upon by Churchwood, remains entirely made up. The specifics don't match up, the sites are off, and the supposed advancements are inaccurate. If you're searching for the Atlantis outlined by Plato, you'll come up empty-handed. It's simply not there. Perhaps the tie between particular legends and particular submerged territories remains a matter of conjecture. There's no way to verify that recollections of Sunderland's submersion made their way to Egypt and evolved into Plato's tale of Atlantis. We can't substantiate that narratives from Storegga tsunami survivors morphed into Europe's widespread flood stories. The pathways of those traditions stretch too far, and the supporting clues are too scattered. We might build reasonable theories, but proof eludes us. The bridge from legend to actual event seems likely, yet it stays unconfirmed. What stands firm, beyond doubt, is this: those submerged realms existed. The folks who inhabited them were genuine. Their recollections, even if warped over time, hold truth. Atlantis and Lemuria, as pinpointed spots in particular writings, never were. Yet as emblems, as fused remembrances of devastation, they ring true. Atlantis isn't a single location. It embodies every coastline claimed by the waters. It covers Sunderland, Doggerland, the sunken platforms along every landmass. It represents the shared inheritance of a transformed planet, an era when territories thrived above the waves but vanished, when the ocean's edge lay more distant than today. Lemuria isn't some span across the Indian Ocean, peopled by titans. It's the awareness that Earth's layout shifts, that land masses heave upward or plunge down, that today's seabeds might have been dry ground just yesterday or eons back. It's the acceptance that minor continents can vanish beneath the surface, as Mauritius and Zealandia demonstrate, showing how the divide between solid earth and water isn't set in stone. These tales hold water collectively, but crumble under scrutiny in their particulars. They capture the outline, deluge, bereavement, endurance, but miss the fine points. They hold on to the sense of something gone, while the details of what, where, and how long ago slip away. They grasp that the waters advanced, yet pin it on divine wrath instead of melting glaciers. That's how recollection functions over vast stretches of time. It endures, but just scrapes by. It passes on the core, but sheds the minutiae. It binds us to bygone days, but through a hazy veil. The depths hold on to what escapes our minds. Under the surface, the vanished realm lingers. No gleaming metropolises grace it. No shrines gleam with legendary alloys. No cutting-edge inventions, no vanished knowledge, no enigmas carved in rock await. Just faint signs, flint implements strewn over the ocean bottom, signs of fingers that crafted them 10,000 years past. Submerged woodlands, their trunks still anchored in the earth where they sprouted prior to the inundation. Tracks in primordial silt, stamped by souls that trod landscapes now 40 meters deep. Barriers erected for trapping seafood or herding prey, safeguarded by the very tide that rendered them useless. Hearths long extinguished after 10,000 years, their ashes entombed in stratified deposits that delineate the shift from former reality to the present one. These aren't tributes to some idyllic epic. They mark the debris of everyday existences endured by individuals confronting unprecedented trials. They foraged, they collected, they angled, they nurtured offspring, they shared tales, they observed the gradual then accelerating encroachment of the sea. They retreated inland as needed. They adjusted where possible. They persisted, or they perished. Those who made it through bore the remembrance onward, flawed and inexact perhaps, but they bore it nonetheless. And here we are millennia on, still reciting variations of that narrative. Atlantis, Lemuria, the deluge legends from countless societies. Each one a reverberation of that fundamental fact. The planet once looked different and the ocean seized it. Should visions of sunken territories visit your sleep this evening, remember, they truly were. The groves were authentic. The streams were real. The inhabitants who roamed those shores cast lines into those bays and, gathered by blazes now smothered under the surf, they existed. The vanishing was tangible. The uprooting, the sorrow, the fight to adjust to an altered landscape, unlike the one their forebears recognized. Every bit of it happened. The echo persists, even as we've lost sight of its basis, in fact. We recast it as folklore because framing it as chronicle felt implausible. We conjured deities, realms, and radiant strongholds because the plain reality of human dwelling, forfeiture, and retention struck us as too mundane, too routine, too mortal. But that's the essence. Down in the brine, proof abides. Scattered across the Java Sea's floor, the North Sea's expanse, the underwater ledges of every mainland, the remnants endure. The swallowed territories aren't gone forever. They're concealed, and gradually, season by season, discovery uncovers them. Good night. Rest easy. If sunken realms fill your dreams, see them as they truly were. Abodes for folks much like ourselves, who dwelled and cherished and mourned, who confronted the advancing tide and endured, who passed down accounts to their young that, improbably, echoed through the ages to reach us now. The sea keeps the record. Now we remember too.